Hello, everybody. Everything looks fun here. That is good. That is good. Listening to Voice of America via Botswana on 15580. Thank you for the audio check. Mr. Rob. Okay, looks okay. So, hey, everybody, welcome aboard. This is the January edition of the streaming, the Shortwave Radio Live show. We are here at the first Saturday of each month. So today is the first Saturday of January. New Year 2024. Happy New Year, everyone. And just to quickly say that the next one will be February the 3rd. And also for those that contributed, the Zoom meeting will be on January 27th. Links will be sent in a few days before the event itself. And we'll talk all about that in the show today, and of course for the contributions of everyone that will have contributed since the last Zoom will be invited to the Zoom meeting. So my name is Joe. I'm located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, northeast part of North America, and we are here to talk about radio, have fun with radio, mainly shortwave, but not just shortwave. It could be all sorts of radio related items. There's a beautiful chat room for those that want to join in. It's a lot of fun, great people there, and I think it's a great place to be. I think we have the most wonderful audience in the world here. Really, really cool. And when all of this is over, we have the Facebook group, which has 3,500 members, which is very active. Lots of activity there of people posting what they listen to and so on, and radios and talking about radios, sharing videos, and all sorts of things. So it's a pretty good place to be. And I think all of this is a very good place to be if you like radio. If you're new in radio, it's even a great place to be. And if you're an old seasoned amateur radio or radio guy for more than, say, 40 or 50 years, this is also a good place for you. Water and cranberry juice. So, welcome aboard, everybody. Hope that you'll have a great show today. Once again, if you want to contribute to our channel, several ways. In the videos, you have the a little heart-shaped button that actually can be used to donate if you like a specific video. Here, there's the super chat. You should see an icon with a $sign on the chat itself. And of course, there's also PayPal, which is a great way to contribute. And here's the PayPal for the contributions. All of you that have contributed in some way are invited to the January 27th Zoom meeting, which is a different thing because Zoom, we see each other. It's kind of fun. I'll have a little presentation on shortwave radio stations that are on the air right now. And we'll probably orient the conversation a little bit more about on what is on the air right now, and ways that you can help stations also, and probably have a discussion if you have a favorite broadcaster and so on. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's coming up January the 27th, 20 hours UTC. For all of those that have sent in a contribution for the show in the last since the last Zoom. So this is a great way to not only help me out, but also have a little extra for contributions and contributors out there. So, Richard Califano, nice to have you here. Happy New Year from Albany, New York, WA2157SWL. Rob, nice to have you here. Our esteemed audio check. Nice to have you on board from Phoenix, Arizona. We have Dwayne. Nice to have you here from Northeast Tennessee. Masters Players Radio and Television Gaming, which is Bobby. Nice to have you on board. WA5107SWL in Morgan City, Louisiana. We have David's Radio Room. Nice to have you on board. Blog or Die. Nice to have you here. DX Swinger. Nice to have you on board from Southeast Pennsylvania. James Farley. Nice to have you here from Old Bridge, New Jersey. KD2GUZ. We have Blog or Die says it's 36 degrees, raining, and 6 mile per hour wind in central Virginia. Here we have barely visible snow. There was a little dusting that happened this week, but we are still pretty much without snow, which is extremely, extremely weird for this time of year. They were saying in the weather that usually from November to here, we have six storms on average that dump snow on us. And this year, well, it's all been rain. We've had storms, but rather than snow, we've had rain. And there's another big storm coming. And it seems that a lot of it will be rain again. So this is very unusual weather right now. Shortwave Archive, nice to have you here from Colorado. Anthony France, nice to have you here from Florida. Craig Martinetti, nice to have you here from Ontario. Timothy Gunter, nice to have you here and watching on his Roku TV. Risto, nice to have you on board from Stockholm, Sweden. SM0SBT. Every time I see Sweden, I always think about the station, one of the stations I miss the most, Radio Sweden on shortwave. Penny C, nice to have you on board. Happy New Year. Meta Lunar, nice to have you on board. Pretty cool to have everybody here. Likes my sweater. My cold, it's kind of, it's a little cool. Let's say it's cool. And I don't put I don't usually put the heating very high because I hate it when it's kind of too hot. So I rather put on a sweater and then actually be too hot. But it was cold. In the last 2 days was cold. We had the coldest weather yet. So it's kind of weird that we have the coldest weather yet, but we don't have any snow. Curtis, nice to have you here. And just got the Seacrane Skywave 2. Cool radio. Not that bad for the X thing for a little radio. So I enjoyed that. Have fun. RJ88 Dakota, nice to have you on board. And probably are having what's similar here. We're pretty cold here the last 2 days. So probably the same type of weather you're getting there. Thank you, Master Players Radio and Television, for the tip. Much appreciated. Jay Watterson 69, nice to have you on board. And we'll give a shout out to Paul the Cat. Diddy Bopper, nice to have you on board from Prospect, Connecticut. David's Radio Room, I got a new CB radio for Christmas. Checked it out and it works great. Fits in the palm of my hand. Can't wait to take it traveling. Cool. It'll be a lot of fun. A little bit of CB radio there. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, Craig Martinetti, if you want a mailing address for donations, you have to, you can either go to curez.com and search for VE2ZZI. My full postal address is there. Or just write to official shortwave radio at gmail.com and I'll send you my postal address there. DVD Xer, ça va bien? J'espère que tu vas bien toi aussi. Nice to have you on board just from outside of Montreal. Rotten Animal, nice to have you here from Toronto. And so what else we have? Mark Willard from North Florida. Nice to have you here. Storms, Radios, and Cats. Nice to have you on board from WRQC 947. Global OCM Transformation and Consultant. Good afternoon. DJ, nice to have you here. W9SSS in Southern California. It's an easy one to remember. The other day, there are a couple of things like that you just jump on. The other day I was doing FT8 and there was this guy calling CQ all the time, and his call was something like W7SEX sex. It's like, yeah, kind of an easy one to remember if I've ever made a contact with. Dave Todd, nice to have you on board. Nice to have you here. And it's pretty cool to have you here, my friend. J Projects from San Diego, California. Nice to have you here. Luc Béliveau, nice to have you on board. Bonani. And Luc is from Montreal. West Peas World, nice to have you on board from Kentucky. The Cave F4WLQ. David Bennett, snow has destroyed his long wire antenna. Yeah, that's the biggest problems with winter. Heavy snow or ice storms, things like that. That's the worst. That's when you're gonna get some damage of antenna damage, basically. I'm gonna do a little change here so that you guys could see that I've want to show you too much of my mess that's up here, but do want to show you that my icon is here plugged in on the MLA30. I'll remove this. When you know that I'm making videos, when my phone stand is here. So yeah, I put up the icon. It's actually in working order right now with the MLA30, and I'm having fun tuning around with it. I also put the CB here, the 980 SSB, the Uniden. So slowly transforming the background here and checking out what I'm going to do. The Kenwood is behind my chair. Like I said in one of my videos, I want all of that working. I mean, you've got radios. You might as well use them. And these are nice radios to play with, of course. West Bees World's got a Texan PL880. That is great. Great radio. I'm going to have fun with that. What else do we have? Richard Califano, would a CB radio be of any use to me in upstate New York? CB is very quiet. When there's skip, there's a lot of activity happening. But if you do get one, chances are it might be very quiet where you are. It's more of I like to have one rather than necessarily having one. Absolutely. If when somebody asks me, should I buy a CB radio? The first thing that I will say is, if you want one, go get one. But no, you don't. I don't think you need really a CB radio. Often I will actually say much more, if in a flea market or a ham fest, you see a cheap CB radio, get that. You'll be okay. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to tell somebody to actually pay hard cash for a brand new CB radio today, honestly. It depends where you are. It depends the activity. I know some places have more activity than others. I've got one for the fun of it, much more than an actual use of it, basically. So that's what I would say to anybody that tells me, yeah, should I get a CB radio? But if, for the fun of it, you got the cash, yeah, why not? So, Blogger, yes, they do have. There's if you go on Amazon or go to several places, there are a few models that are sold handheld CB radios. There's still a few of them that are sold out there. Definitely. Here at the electronics store, Addison Electronics, and they don't have it now, but not that long ago, I think it was in November or October when I went there, they had a 40 channel handheld, and they do have two mobile rigs, one with SSB and one with just AM mode. So I guess there are still some people out there that, truckers do have CB radios still. Um, and it's here, it's really, really the best time for listening to CB activity here is when there's the snow removal. Because what happens is that you have the trucks from the city that do the snow removal, but the snowblower needs to dump the snow in trucks, and these are privately owned companies that have trucks for that. And these companies, they pretty much all have a CB radio in the trucks. So they often actually will talk on the CB radio to ask where the snowblower is so they can go and catch up and wait in line for their turn to get their trucks filled with snow. So it in a snowstorm, after a snowstorm, when they start doing all the snow removal here in Montreal, the CB channels are full of activity of all of that. It's actually kind of fun to listen to. And when there's a snowstorm and they start the snow removal, so I'll often have the CB radio turned on and just scanning the different channels, see where they are, and so at the same time, it's kind of fun because if they put out the warnings that the snow removal is going to be like today, what's going to happen is that you can listen in and see where they are. Are they approaching my street? So yeah, kind of fun. But there's no big serious CB activity here. If there's not that, and there's no skip, the only activity, most of the activity I've seen is a handful of passionate CBers that are mostly on channel 16 lower sideband all the time. And I bet you if I would call or say, "Hey, is anybody there on channel 16?" There's almost always someone just coming back and saying, "Yep, I'm listening." I've actually done that with the CB radio a few times because I wanted to see if my signal was making it somewhere. So I knew that channel 16 was my best chance of having somebody reply back, and there was a guy back. He lives maybe about 7 or 8 streets from here. And it's very interesting. I like these guys that hang on channel 16 because they're very knowledgeable. So when they start talking, they often are technical, talk about their setups and so on. It's interesting to see that they don't seem to be ham radio operators in any way, nor do they seem to want to be hams. I know one of them is always mentioning that he's hanging out on the illegal side of CB, where he's calling CQ on 27555 regularly. And I actually hear him when I punch in 27555. I hear him calling CQ very, very often, especially when the skip is open. And even when there's no skip, sometimes I hear him pop up just calling CQ out of curiosity to see if anybody's going to answer back. Matt, Denver, Colorado. Nice to have you on board. Dave, lots of RTTY and the weekend of the handbands. Yeah, I think there's a contest. There's an RTTY contest this weekend. That's what you're listening to. And they are all unencrypted for a simple reason. There's encryption is not allowed on the handbands. Tarbin Irvinson, nice to have you on board, my friend from Norway. Where do we have? Let's continue here. No snow in Denver yet. Same in Montreal. Cold and no snow pretty much. Mickey Delmage in Sherwood Park, Alberta, Canada. Nice to have you on board. Been a while. Happy New Year. Hope everything's all right and you got a great holiday season. Storms, Rages, and Cats found a 50-foot dog run made from a dog runner, about 50 feet long, and since it is built for holding a dog, it holds up rather well in the winter. Yeah, You've got to set it up right. I always check, do a little check on my wire antennas and stuff. Um, the Before the winter arrives, because I know that winter can be pretty bad here. Right now, it's not too bad. We did have one slight night of a couple of hours of freezing rain, but not enough to be of a problem. But you never know. Here, you never know what can happen. So better check the wires and everything. And also, I will often tell everybody, if you put up a wire antenna, don't choose too thin a wire because it can easily break. The size of the wire doesn't change how good it is. It doesn't matter. Um, but choose the size to make sure that it can withstand the bad weather, the ice, the snow, sometimes the heavy snow, and the high winds, because you never know, you could have a storm with high winds. So put the combination of high winds and a nice storm, and you've got the perfect mix for a tough run on a wire antenna. And make sure that at each end where you attach it well, and that it can actually withstand some weight in case ice actually accumulates on it. Kevin, nice to have you here. Says CB radio, great for a laugh if you live very close to a real big truck stop. Mita Lunar, have you found any local CB contacts where you are? So, like I was saying, there's this little gang hanging on channel 16 lower sideband. And often there, just out of curiosity, I'm going to go check here. The channel 16, 27, I believe it's 165. Yeah, they're there. Or it's Skip. No, that's Skip. I'm hearing some, but it's Skip. It's not the guys that I hear usually. They speak French. But this is where I usually will hear some of the activity. So, what else do we have? Davis Radio Room. Ritavis has a CB radio for $40. Yeah, I've seen one on, I think it's a Uniden I've seen on Amazon for like 45 or 50 Canadian dollars. A handheld 40 channels, 4 watts. So, Dave, I heard more Europeans this morning on 11 meters than North Americans. CB is pretty much dead locally. I was a diehard 11 DXer at one time. The local CB scene, that's where it's pretty much dead now. What I see is that the local stuff, not a lot of it's happening. Yet, if you have a single sideband CB and a decent antenna, just the stock 12 watts that CBs have for a single sideband is often enough to actually skip and make contacts with other countries. So that's kind of interesting. Andy New, Happy New Year. Nice to have you on board. Christopher Cullen, Happy New Year from Londonderry, North Wales, UK. Nice to have you here from the UK. Enjoying the new Quansheng UVK58. Got mine working on 27 megahertz. Loads of activity in UK and Europe. EM is amazing at the moment. USA booming in afternoons. Jim's radio check. Nice to have you on board. Happy New Year. Timothy Gunter left CB back in the day when it was a kid. Yeah, that was fun. There was a lot of activity. I remember in the 80s, it was crazy. 70s and 80s. And there was always, there was all of these TV shows where CB radio was kind of popular in them. The Dukes of Hazzard, I remember. CB radio was kind of a center part of that It was a car and CB radio thing, basically. Um, Jim's Radio Check. I've had my CB radio on all day. Today, I'm only 2 miles from the interstate, and I haven't heard anything. So you leave it scanning all 40 channels. That's what I do with the Uniden. I'll hear stuff because here there's several highways that are not that far away, including the big highway here, that's elevated highway that I'm not far from. I'll often hear truckers on 19, channel 19, channel 20. I'll hear some guys with CB radios in their cars on channel 10. But the fact that I know that in the US, you guys, I guess some of you guys still have some of those here. Before Channel 9 was kind of the emergency channel, you would had somebody monitor Channel 9 all the time, and they would, if there was an emergency, there was somebody there to help you out. But this is gone here. I don't even know if anywhere in Canada there's still a crew or somebody listening for emergencies on Channel 9. I know in the US, some of you guys had told me that you still have some of these emergencies available on Channel 9. But I think it's a indication that CB radio is kind of quiet down here. So, and 6RLS, Happy New Year from Berkeley, California. KWLN 61, nice to have you on board from Tucson, Arizona. Happy New Year. Let me just go down here and go back up. What else do we have? Jim's Radio Check finally got some snow. Mr. Phillips 369, nice to have you on board. Timothy Gunter says he's got snow in western Arkansas, but melted pretty fast. Well, here we had a big snowstorm in early December. Late November, early December, late November, which dumped up more than a foot of snow. But because of all the rain we got, it's all gone. I thought we would have a white Christmas when we saw that storm. Nope, we did not have a white Christmas. It was all gone by Christmas. Bill Mead, nice to have you on board. Happy New Year from Pennsylvania. Snowing today, but heavy rain coming. Autism Radios, nice to have you on board. Vicky Pelletier, salut, bonne année, j'espère que ça va bien. Nice to have you on board. We have, am I propping up the power lines? Power lines here are in the front. So in the back, I'm all right. Penny C, I have a wire antenna that came with the PL660. Will the MLA30 be any better for shortwave reception? As I can only use the wire antenna indoors, not outdoors. It all comes down to noise. If you have quiet environments where you can pick up tons of things with the wire, the MLA30 might not be that much of an improvement. But if you have a hard time getting any stations because it's too noisy, the MLA30 is your best choice that could help you get a lot more on the radio. Electric Bloke, nice to have you here from Yorkshire. The new Texan PL330 comes with USB-C instead of micro USB. So they have made the change. That's interesting. I guess it all goes also with the money, because as the technology moves and everything comes USB-C, kind of makes it easier and probably cheaper to make it with the standard connections rather than using an older, micro USB style connection. Storms, radios, and cats. I have the city 20 miles away running a CB radio with the PLL jumped, so it talks on multiple channels at once using vulgar language. That's a lot. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on the CB radio. Some of them are blasting so much they're kind of almost, overloaded and distorting, and it's just crazy. It's like just there's so much weirdness out there of the CB world. Rick Welsh, been shortwave listening 45 plus years, just getting back into after a 2 year break. Still have my first radio, the DX100, and trying out SDR. Cool, cool. You'll find SDR quite a lot of fun. Who operates the weather channels in Canada? It's the Environment Canada, the government-funded Environment Canada service that operates the weather channels. And remember, if you listen to those, if they do give an announcement out that maybe they want to retire a channel or not, do call in the number that they have and explain to them how it's a bad idea. From what I understand, what I've heard, so here we had that happening, and there was one on Mont Tremblant up north. There was one in Magog near the Estrie region near Sherbrooke, and they had a couple of years back gave an announcement that they were going to retire the service. I remember the one in the Estrie region. The Memphrey Magog Lake, which is a very big lake. Lots of people, boating on that lake. And one of the guys that was actually watching the video I had posted about it had come back with a comment saying, "Well, I actually need to have weather radio because when I'm out on the lake far, the cell phone doesn't work anymore. I'm too far from a cell tower. The only way I can get weather warnings is through the Environment Canada weather service on VHF." So I had told him, I said, there's the phone number. And I said, do call, explain to them what you just told me, that it would be extremely dangerous for people that are boating on the lake and that just don't have any coverage anymore. And they didn't take it off finally. So I would guess if at least a couple of people call in to complain, it's one of the things is probably they're checking out, is anybody listening? And if it's the case, then they're probably going to be like, okay, well, I guess some people use our service. I mean, I find it so stupid that they shut them down because, let's face it, with all the government spending running, like in the US, running a NOAA weather channel doesn't cost much. You're not going to ruin your country with the money invested in a NOAA weather channel. And in fact, you can save lives, which is a pretty good thing. Same here for the Environment Canada. So, and it's funny because the one at Mont Tremblant got off the air. And one day, about 6 months ago, because the only place that I can actually hear all three, the local one here, I can hear the one from Magog, and I can hear the one from Mont Tremblant in my backyard balcony. If I stand at a specific space, I can actually get all three of them. The Mont Tremblant and Magog are on the same frequency, but what's funny is I just moved the radio, 2 feet away. I get the one from Magog, and I put it back 2 feet, and I get the one from Mont Tremblant, which is just funny. And I do get the NOAA weather one on 162,400 out of Burlington. So it's actually on Mount Mansfield, I believe, the transmitter location. 6 months ago, I was tuning around expecting to hear only Magog, and surprise, surprise, they actually put back the Mont Tremblant on the air. So I guess somebody somewhere that didn't call in complained that maybe he needed that. In a place like Mont Tremblant, here, as soon as you get out of the city and you go up north, we have a lot of mountains here. About you do about half an hour out in Montreal towards the north, and it's there's tons of mountains everywhere. And what happens is that the mountainous area with cell phone coverage is pretty bad. So what happens is you get cell phone coverage when you're near a road, but as soon as you get into the small roads, into the forests and the mountainous areas, your cell coverage doesn't work anymore. So I would guess that somebody somewhere must have complained that he didn't have the capability of getting the NOAA weather channels, which were, I when I would go north to La Concepcion, where my dad had his shack, um, that that signal I didn't get. There was no cell coverage there. I didn't get, you know, much of anything because of all the mountains around, but I did get very clearly the NOAA, the Environment Canada Weather Channel from Mont Tremblant. It came in very well, and there's a lot of lakes there, a lot of big lakes too. So I guess that these are important, much more important than we think. Honestly, the general population doesn't know that. Most of the general population, if you say, "Hey, there's weather channels you can listen on the radio," it's like, "What do you mean?" Most people don't know that, but people that do some of the outdoor activities, especially boaters and a lot of people that go out into the woods and hiking and stuff, a lot of them actually know that because they learn that, oh, look at that, I can have weather by using that. So it's a service that doesn't cost much, but can definitely save lives. Met late 70s, early 80s was the era of the CB fad, and the Dukes of Hazzards played its part in that. Yep, definitely, definitely, it was the time. Robert Varnon, nice to have you here. KC2TEL in New Jersey. N6RLS entering Voice of America 15730. Music in French. Yep, that's one of the frequencies that comes out of the Greenville, North Carolina transmitters. Star Wars Raisins and Cats. Channel 9 has been taken over by Mexico stations using that channel like the Super Bowl Channel 6. KI5 ZIF. Nice to have you here, Clint. Yeah, GMRS are great. They are definitely great. Today that's what probably is the thing. If you buy walkie talkies or anything, you'll buy those FRS or GMRS ones, which actually give you really amazing coverage compared to anything we had back in the day. So these are the new CB radios, basically. Deuce Van Dalen, nice to have you here. Bonne année. Happy New Year. Nice to have you on board. John Beckham, nice to have you here. DBS C777, nice to have you here. KC1PSK. Garrett Brennan, nice to have you here. Autism Radio and Cats says, Autism Radio, sorry, no cats. Autism Radios says, we missed when it had White Christmas. Yep, definitely. What else do we have? Speaking of Channel 6, pretty active right now. Yeah, I'm sure it must be. Let's check it out here. Go down to 25. Yeah, you could see the peak of activity on the there's one here, 6.5. It's so funny. So funny to see that a couple of the channels around it are actually more popular right now here than Super Bowl Channel 6. So it's kind of interesting. Um, Clint is in Dallas, Texas. Dirk John Brewer, nice to have you here. Says still happy with the Texan PL990X. Yeah, I love it, love it. It's part of the radios I often take out to tune around the bands. Steve Dostlowski, nice to have you here from Medicine Hat, Alberta. Nice to have you here. Luggard Eye, loud signal in Spanish on CB Channel 9 in Virginia. So maybe one of those Mexicans. CB Madness, yes, CB Madness. What else do we have? Mickey Dalmage, with the rising solar cycle in the mid to late 70s and the popularity of Smokey and the Bandit movie. Yep, Smokey and the Bandit. CB was a must. I avoided the urge. Good buddy. What's your handle? Yeah, uh, it's, I've had mostly walkie talkies from my first pair of talkies that only had channel 14, I guess 79, 80, 1979, which would mean then I got better, the realistic TRCs that were better. But I didn't have I got my first real CB, let's call it like that, with the Navajo base station, the TRC 432, which I should proudly display here because it needs to have its spot here too. And by then there was still activity. When I got the TRC 432, there was still some activity out there. But it wasn't. It was starting to be the decline of CB, and I guess this is 1985, 1986, around there. Maybe even 1984 ish that I got it. CB radio was still there, but it wasn't in that like 1980 to 1985 period. There was a lot of slowdown in the CB radio already. So Gareth Brennan is from Dublin, East Coast, Ireland. Jim's radio check CB handle is smooth operator. John Beckham from Northeast Florida, pretty good. Enjoy your video on buying the right shortwave. Cool. Bill Miller, nice to have you on board from Northern Ireland, MI0NUM. Pretty cool to have you here. Brent Sutherland, nice to have you here. Says Environment Canada really seems to want to cut off urban Canada from weather radio. I'm a boater and I use it. Yeah, there's this. I don't know. They're trying to save money somewhere, and they're not saving money. So okay, let's see. Let's face it. Is if I look here, the Montreal one that's on top of Montreal in the middle of the city, and it has a decent coverage. Probably goes far into the suburbs and outside Montreal. How useful is that one? Well, it is useful for one thing. If you have a weather radio with alerts, you get alerted by bad weather. So there's that use. That's definitely a good use, even in an urban area. I think the problem of Environment Canada and NOAA weather radio stations is they're unknown. I'm pretty sure in the US, most people have no idea of the NOAA weather stations. Like here, most people have no idea that Environment Canada runs a set of radio stations with weather. And if you say that to somebody, what they're going to reply back? They're going to reply back that you've got your cell phone and you got the internet and you've got the TV and the radio that you can listen to the weather to. But all of that doesn't replace the fact that a weather warning or a weather alert those stations actually do it better than whatever. Your phone is not going to ring because you've got a weather alert. But if you've got a weather, a weather radio that has alert on it, you'll be warned of bad weather coming your way. I think it comes down to the fact that maybe some of the newer guys coming into like Environment Canada, maybe they don't understand how useful a service like that is. It comes down, once again, we say it regularly, that the younger generations today have a tendency to think radio is obsolete until something happens and then they notice, look at that, radio was useful today. And we forget that, and a lot of people are in that mode. The problem is, you got to tell them, no, radio has its use. And in this case, maybe some of the younger people working at Environment Canada, which are more connected, might say, no need that. We're wasting money with that. Why is it useful? We have it on our phones. Until somebody that, like Brent, is a boater and says, well, I actually need that because it could save my life. Let's face it, on a big lake, bad weather, big thunderstorm coming in real fast in the summer days, it can turn into a nightmare. And if you're warned, before, well, maybe you're gonna just go back and think about boating a little later or another day, you know. And if you get that alert, a big lake is becomes like an ocean when there's a lot of wind. It's pretty crazy. Things turn bad really quickly. So I don't know. It's, I think, a question of education, having, telling everybody, we've got this service and it's very useful, and telling them, I guess, we say write to a radio station to let them know you're listening in. Well, maybe it's not a bad idea to find an email, or if they give out a phone number, to call in and say, this could save my life because I used the weather radio for this purpose, or I've got a alert, weather alert radio that warns me in case of the U.S. You guys have a lot of tornadoes in some areas, and everybody in possible hurricane lands everywhere in the U.S. also, and for the rest, there's still really, really bad weather everywhere. Could happen. We can have really bad thunderstorms here in Montreal, so I think these are useful. Sergeant Rock, nice to have you on board. And it's 74 degrees and humid in Hawaii. Nice to have you on board. Aloha. Happy New Year. Ricky, nice to have you on board. Bonne année. Nice to have you on board, so, as usual. And always cool to have you here from Alberta, Canada. Dave Todd, his 11-meter call was 9ET113 from 1987 to 2000. OG Railways, nice to have you here. David's radio room says my weather radio is my first warning of tornadoes, and definitely could save lives. Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome radio at my campground. There's no weather channels in East Otis, Massachusetts. My campground. I hate that I need to know the coverage sometimes, because I know that in the United States there's also a kind of a push towards closing some of those NOAA weather stations, which is a bad idea, honestly. Rotten Animal, I'm retired now. When I worked, I would listen to my CB every day. People would yell and swear at each other. It was like a comedy act every day. John Beckham. Okay. Tassovi, nice to have you on board. And lightly snowing and cold in New York City. Nice to have you here, my friend. It's always cool to have you on board. So let's check it out here. Try to find where I was. I lost my spot here. Okay, here we go. We have Inverse Squarela. Nice to have you on board. We have David Antonio. Nice to have you on board from Brazil. Matt says, I remember being in a Buster Brown shoe store and they were selling keychains that had all the CB10 codes meanings. Wanted one, but my mom wouldn't get it for me. Oh, man. Yeah. Jumbo Jet. Nice to have you here. William L. What do you think of the AT5555? I have no idea what that is. What is the AT5555? That's the AT5555. Okay. Well, it looks great. It does look great. I gotta say. And with some mod, depending on how you buy it, because if you buy it, you could they can even go into the 10-meter handband. Looks interesting. Well, it's just expensive. It's a little expensive, but hey, that does look interesting. Definitely. Blogger Die, old CB rules prohibited to use any private code words, but the 10 signals were public. Yeah, well, it's like amateur radio. It's technically not supposed to do anything that's encrypted. It has to be something that's open so that anybody can listen in. Penny C says, I listened to your international radio reports and the topic about getting involved with CKUT radio station was interesting. Yeah, because we were talking about community radio station. I actually am getting a little more involved. There's a station, a community radio station in Longueuil, just South Shore, on 103.3 FM. And actually, last night I spent 4 hours there. There's an 80s show on Friday evenings, and I was part of the show last night. And I'll probably be part of the show every Friday night. It's a community radio station. They are always looking for people to do stuff. In that case, they were looking for people to do shows. Somebody actually came up to me and said, "You should do a show on the station." It's a French language community radio station. And apparently, from what I heard yesterday, it's the most listened to community radio station in all of Canada, which is kind of impressive, I got to say. And they say that they have 208,000 listeners, which is also huge for a community radio station. Now, you know, if you have a community radio station around you and, you have some time, most of them are always looking for someone to make a radio show of some sort. So, you got to just take the time and see. Sometimes maybe there's a show that or an idea about a show that you have, a show that doesn't exist anywhere. And why not, put something together and if you like radio, being on the radio, you're going to be on the air on a real radio station, and it's kind of fun when you think about it. That I was saying yesterday, I've been listening to that 80s show for 3 or 4 years now. And 3 years ago, I would never have thought that I'd actually be on the show eventually. But, it's things are turning out that it might be the case. Jim's Radio Check, the GMRS radio and the Midwest, the repeaters are all networked together, and you can talk hundreds of miles. You see, that's a difference from Canada and US. You guys in the US have a license requirement and you have repeaters and all sorts of things. Here in Canada, we have these are just there's no repeaters allowed. It's we're just using the talkies to talk to each other, and that's it. Shortwave archive. It depends on the market where you live, but for the most part, they are French and English. They alternate between both languages. Like here in Montreal, you'll have the English, the full English a weather report and all the station reports and stuff for the different areas, and then I'll change the French and I'll have the full thing in French, and they alternate like that, French and English. What else? Let's go down. Hi, Jay Dakota. Remember having a cheap set of walkie talkies. One of them fell and the crystal detector broke inside of. After that, I was able to hear Voice of America and other shortwave stations jumbled with each other. Matt says, I've mentioned it before, but in the 80s, my family took a big road trip, which took us to Montreal, and I had my Radio Shack weather radio and heard a French language weather radio station there. Yeah, you probably heard the 162.550, which is the frequency, the one that was that's here in Montreal. Brent, weather makes you feel good to be in bed when you forecast freezing spray, yeah, or listening to the radio. There's a lot of there's something about either doing amateur radio contacts or just plain listening to the radio when there's a snowstorm. I don't know what it is. I always feel that it's kind of cool to do so. Um, yeah, there's a new XH Data D608 emergency radio coming out. That's going to be kind of interesting, I guess. So, yeah, the big problem right now, and it's like Ricky says, a pronunciation, but the big problem that we have right now is how crappy the new electronic voices, the computer voices they put on, they're just so darn crappy. I can't believe that you use a crappy voice like that to give the weather. It's just I don't get it. I just don't get it. Even here in Montreal, it's like, what the hell is that? It's crazy. I was just looking if I can do a quick. I have a quick. Don't have a quick one really close, but dang, the weather is forget it. So I'm sure some people have a hard time, and even the pronunciation, like they'll say like, oh, we this is Environment Canada station in Montreal operating on a frequency of 162.550 megahertz. Is like, what the hell is that robotized megahertz? And even in the weather, some of the weather, the naming of cities or areas is like, oh, what the hell's that? This is the worst thing ever. I don't know how much money they spent doing that, but definitely was a lot better when there was a real guy or a real, person giving out the weather. It's just crazy. Craig Martinetti's shortwave radio call are WDX2ROE. And Blogger Die, WDX4JHH. Upstate shortwave listening. Nice to have you here. WDX4IJN. Michael, nice to have you here. Sorry to late, but glad to be here now. Getting a cup of coffee and saying a big hello. So nice to have you here. Happy New Year. Verse Quarla, weather radio plays an important role. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just radio check. Weather radio saves me one night with a flash flood warning. The water was already up to my patio door. Thank God for the alert. So, Brent says, when operating small craft, I have VHF. I'm not on the internet. Yep. Yep. Just a little reminder to everybody as we're at the 1 hour mark that we will have our special contributor Zoom meeting coming up on January 27th at 20 hours Universal Time. The Zoom link will be sent, and the registration for the Zoom will be sent a few days before the event. And what do you have to do to be there? You have to have given me a contribution since the last Zoom. So it could be done through a video where you did like it and gave me a little something, through the super chat here, or once again through PayPal at the email that you see here. So you send a contribution there. And anybody that has given me a contribution through any of these forms will be in the Zoom for January. So get your contributions in. It helps me out, helps me purchase new radios, and continue doing what I do. So if you like what I do in my content, think about a contribution in some form here, and you'll be invited to the Zoom meeting. Remember that if you give a contribution to me, make sure that I have your email. So send your email at officialshortwaveradio@gmail.com. That's the way that you will let me know what's your email so I can send you the Zoom link. So Zoom contributors Zoom meeting Saturday, the January 27th at 20 hours Universal Time. And so Zoom meeting is always kind of cool. And we'll focus a little bit on the international shortwave broadcasters that are on the air right now. We'll have a little discussion on that. I'll have a little presentation. So hope that you join in. And this is to thank you for the contributions to the channel. So as we continue, storms, radios, and cats. I am a Skywarn storm spotter. We rely on the weather station and vice versa. Radar apps and our eyes are the tools of the trade. NOAA also alerts of attacks too. Yeah, it's that's also a cool thing about amateur radio. We have Skywarn Quebec here that when the bad weather rises, often we'll tune one of the repeaters where I know that the activity is going on. This is also kind of interesting because they have very interesting reports of the different storms, the directions they're heading to, and so on. It's kind of cool. Maybe that's something I should think of. Although I'm not set up with a base station, I think with my handheld, I do get a few repeaters very well, so I could probably operate from the handheld. But that could be something fun. Dan V, nice to have you on board. And well, my noise floor is average. Let's say it's kind of not low, not too high, but I definitely could be better. N8 WJZ, nice to have you here from a snowy Ohio. OG Railways is 17 years old, and I do not think that radio is obsolete. So that's good. We still have some people out there that are young and still believe radio is a good thing. We need people like you, and you need to propagate that news, that information to everybody, including those of your age, because too many people think that it's not. Derek John Brower says, what would you say is a good and effective place globally to enjoy shortwave? Things are not all created equal, and there's definitely places in the world where shortwave radio has more signals to help you out. I often say it, I'm a little jealous of Europe. You guys in Europe get a lot more transmissions that are directed to you than here in North America. North America has been, apart from a few broadcasters, deserted with target area listening. We have a few stations definitely that still target North America. Like what comes to mind is Spain, Turkey, Romania. Some of those are targeting here. There's some relays from WRMI that target North America, like Radio Prague, Slovakia, and a few others. Yet most of the listening you'll do in North America, and that's the hardest part. I think that's probably one of the difficult things to explain is North America is not the target of most broadcasters, but doesn't mean you don't hear them. You hear them still. An example of that, I listen to the BBC 25 900, or I can listen to the BBC at nights like 0500 or 400. There's several frequencies that come in loud enough to have easy, easy listening. But I'll hear Voice of America, and I'll hear Radio France and Vatican Radio, and I'll hear these stations. I'll hear all of them. But of course, because you're not the target area, the signal level isn't as strong as somebody's just targeting you. So, if you're listening to Romania in the East Coast, it's strong. Why? Well, they're sending it our way. Those other stations are all there, and there's still a lot to listen to. But the problem is it's weaker. And because our noise floor has risen, that's where it becomes a big problem for a lot of people. I know some of the people that buy a radio. Some of the guys who buy a radio will tune it and say, well, there's nothing on. And the problem will be, yeah, well, signals are there, but they're weaker, and your noise where you are is too high, so you just don't hear anything. So for in your head, it's like, well, there's nothing on. And I get that regularly. It's like, yeah, well, I tune around, there's nothing. Well, yeah, there's something, but it's not as simple as that, and that's the biggest problem. Noise is the biggest enemy. Once again, anybody thinking the internet is what broke shortwave, it's not, because if it was, everybody would have jumped on the internet. And what I mean by that is, where is Radio Netherlands on the internet? It doesn't exist anymore. Did Radio Norway stay on the internet? No. Radio Sweden, well, they have this weird English thing that's far from what it was. And it's, I think, once a week only. And I don't even know if it's still done. Even the World Radio Network, which used to be for me, if somebody would have said the World Radio Network is going to take over, the World Radio Network at the beginning, when they had a lot of broadcasters on board and the different areas, Africa, North America, South America, they had different streams, all of that together, I thought, well, maybe this is a future, and this is where the international audience will be at some point. And I listen to it a lot. I don't listen to it almost any time now, because every time I do, it's some uninteresting broadcast, not necessarily from a broadcaster. Plus, once again, if the internet was such an important thing, why is it that all the stations that shut down also shut down and removed any programming from the World Radio Network and are not on the internet anymore? It's that's the thing here. So the killer of our hobby is a lot of other things. It's the shift in thinking, well, why should we broadcast in North America? Maybe the audience isn't there because nobody's writing in. And the noise floor got higher and higher, making it more difficult to listen to anything. Remember, there's diehard guys out there like me and a lot of you. We're crazy guys. We'll listen in to that noisy thing because we will listen into that noisy thing. And it's kind of cool. It's a signal from, Radio New Zealand. It's not the best one night, but you're still going to listen to it. And listen to the program. And that's not what a lot of people were. Also, a lot of people that listen to the content wanted to have stuff to listen to, they, even if they be in a low noise environment, they don't want to have to listen to something that has static on it. They want it to be like we had it in the 70s or 80s, a signal that's strong enough and good enough to be clear, and we listen to whatever they're telling us. So there's a lot of things that are crazy, but there are places in the world that definitely are better. If you're in Africa, if you're in Europe, if you're in Asia, well, in Asia, go tune in SDR in any Asian country. It's like shortwave in the 70s here. Now, I have to say there's a lot of Chinese language stuff because China is like the biggest shortwave country in the world. They use shortwave a lot. Plus all the jammers and all the stuff they do, they've got hundreds of transmitter sites. It's amazing everywhere that there's transmitters in China for shortwave broadcasting. Um, I guess if you understand Chinese, you probably or Mandarin, you probably have a lot of things to listen to there because there's a lot of other broadcasts that are also meant for China and for Asia that might be in Mandarin or in a lot of Asian language, of course. But there's a lot of stuff in English and French also. I look at the schedules on things towards Asia and so on. Um, I think North America and probably Australia are two of the dead zones of shortwave now, and it makes it sad because it makes it tough for a lot of people to tune in to something. And versus square law, weather radio plays an important role, um, important part regarding those who live in the tornado alley in the USA. Absolutely, absolutely, it's a must. I mean, you have to. Shortwave archive. When I got my first weather radio, a severe thunderstorm warning went off, and all my family was impressed. As my grandma said, we knew about the storm before anybody else. Yep, yep, yep. There's the marine weather broadcast too. Got here. I got I think two here, two channels here, 161 850 and 161 650, something like that. That comes in here with more marine warnings and all. James Radio Check says the weather alert radio seems to always go off before the cell phone. Yeah, mainly because I probably during the first line of all of that, they are, they are part of the weather system and the weather, like here's Environment Canada. So they are the first ones. Your phone, if your phone does get the alert, it gets the alert from, you know, the from NOAA in the US. It gets the alert from the Environment Canada here, and of course, your weather radio is tuned in directly to that service, so it's kind of normal. It gets it before everybody else. Yeah, well, most of the good weather alert radios are actually weather alert radios that you plug in. Like here, I've got one from Uniden. I also have one that I need to talk more about that I purchased on Amazon that is pretty good, and it's a Chinese brand. But they both come with a power adapter. So what you do is you put it on a desk or you put it on a table somewhere. It's plugged in, but is also powered by battery. So if the power goes out, the battery's going to continue having the radio continue working, because just battery only, unless because there could be some cases where the battery drain is very low, but definitely there will be battery drain, and you need to make sure that your batteries are always okay because you're gonna lose. You're not gonna hear that alert if the battery's bad. Um, RJ Dakota says that in small towns they're trying to take down the old sirens, trying to implement internet access to weather stations. Bad idea. Yeah, weather radio is definitely a better idea. Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. This is somebody somewhere thinking the internet is always there. Well, I can bet you that if a tornado goes through an area, there must be the internet is going to be kind of a problem. And imagine an even worse. Well, it's very bad to have tornadoes, but imagine hurricanes, which cover a wider area sometimes. I mean, look at Florida when it gets devastated. Part of Florida gets devastated by a huge hurricane. Do you think the internet's working? I don't think so. Hook 911, nice to have you on board. Ricky, for areas beyond traditional cell coverage, work has started to allow satellite reception on mobile phones. Still to be seen how the tech will develop. Yeah. Chuck, nice to have you here from South Texas and 5 KVO. Blogger Die, will rabbit ears help FM reception on my portable with an external antenna jack? Yeah, it should. It should because it resonates in those frequencies. Remember that the rabbit ears were designed for the VHF and UHF range, so they're going to be good. Like channel 6 was at the bottom part of the FM band, so I would say that rabbit ears definitely would improve on reception of FM radio, definitely, because they're resonating pretty much in those frequencies. Then you get the UHF part that is higher. Bill me, the US and Canada has a population of almost 400 million people. There's no reason we couldn't mandate weather radio on all car radios. It would be a benefit and would raise the services profile. Yep, definitely. Definitely. KW 1161, people at the FCC are equivalent would blush at some of the modern CB codes the CBers give to each other. DJ K Solo, nice to have you on board from New York. Art, nice to have you on board for New Jersey. K2ADC, Happy New Year. I didn't notice that for a long time they had the cat in the logo, but I think I remember hearing about that because CHAA Shah, like it's if you take the letters and pronounce it in French, Shah, it's cat. So yeah, that could be the reason. I haven't looked at any specific hardware for the FTDX10, but I believe somebody talked to me about it to control his FTDX10 remote, and seems to be enjoying it. Greg Scherer, nice to have you on board. Gregory the Catman in Southeast Illinois, and what's the computer voice? Iron Mike? Oh, it's crappy, Mike. It doesn't even sound. It sounds different. It's as if it's trying to imitate an actual human voice. At least the Iron Mike voices and stuff, they're just computerized voices. Those are computerized voices trying to pass for a human, but it just doesn't work. It's so weird. Michael Mora, nice to have you here. Inverse Square Law, I still receive frequency schedules from Radio Romania International and a Christmas card. Oh, that's cool. You know, some stations, they just lose track of all of that. When I I remember when I moved from back in the day, it was crazy. You tried to change you tried to change the your address for some reason, and it just didn't work. So I would when I moved from my first address when I was living with my parents, um, the I don't know how many. Well, when I moved, my dad moved out of that place, so he stayed there for about a year and a half. I would go by maybe once every couple of weeks. He would have letters from shortwave stations, and I would actually tell the shortwave stations, "Hey, I got a new postal address." Now, instead of changing it, I would get two times the same thing at two different addresses. And I still remember many years later. I mean, gone from there in what, 89? Maybe 1995, 96. It's been several years that somebody else is living there. But my sister-in-law was a friend of hers. So my sister-in-law had told her, I said, you might receive letters from, for this name. It's my brother-in-law. And I think it was like 6 years later, and I was still getting schedules for Radio Cairo. I was like, really? Come on, guys. This is crazy. It's just, yeah, KW 1161. EA3IEK. Nice to have you here, David from Barcelona. ¿Cómo está, mi amigo? So he says, so cool that you're going to use more your ICR 8500 as well as the R5000. So yeah, I mean, I put it there. It's plugged in now. It's active. So you know what, I can tune around and have fun. There's a sense of fun of tuning around with just the dial button. Sorry, guys. So Penny C, I like the WB and Bluetooth feature, the weather band and Bluetooth feature on the XA's data D109 WB. However, the shortwave stations are hit or miss at times. Interference with other stations. Is it due to my area, or is this a problem with the radio? Both. You probably have some local AM station that's strong enough to mess with it. It's the problem with the D109 and the D109 WB. I've seen false claims of the WEB is fixed. It isn't. It's the same. If you have a crappy experience on the 109, you'll have the same exact crappy experience on the 109 WB. It ain't different there. The problem is there's something, their filtering is not that great with AM radio kind of mixing in with stations. So it's part crappy design, part location. Because if you don't live near any AM radio station that's very strong, you don't have that problem. It's okay. It works. And so that's why I see some people saying, wow, this is one of the best radio ever. Yeah, depending on where you live, it might perform good. But here, if I tune around, and actually I have a video that I posted, there's a lot of breakthrough of AM medium wave on the radio. Now, I haven't tried it much with the MLA30, but I would guess that maybe an external antenna could change that in a way. Depends on how and why it does it. But even there, the D109 is okay. but it doesn't make the cut for me on some of the best radios out there for the price. Which is sad because a little bit more, even if it would have been $5 or $10 more because you add a little bit more in filtering and helping it out, could have made a difference and made that radio actually reach the top 10 best radios. But for me, it doesn't. It doesn't. In all the radios I got, it doesn't go into the top 10. Definitely. But it all depends. So it's like half and half. A bit of a problematic design, making medium wave stations overload into the shortwave bands, and part of course, location, because that flaw will depend on where you live. TV Toski, if you have airband radio, you can tune into the airport radio for weather, but it goes well beyond that. Most people need, but still covers the basics in English only. Yeah, they have the automatic stuff. They're tough here. The airport is so the Montreal International Airport is about a good 30 kilometers away to the west of me. And those weather stations, unless I got a good antenna, like when I have the discount up and running, yeah, okay, I hear it, but it's not very loud. Yeah, they always have this weird misprint of the price when they're putting something together. They should fix that because it looks weird. BMC Mike, nice to have you on board from Switzerland, HB3XBL. Nice to have you here. Um, RJ Dakota. Yeah, well, the thing is if you hear them, that's cool. That's cool because even if they're not targeting us, if I hear the BBC on 25 900 for the full 2 hours, it's great, and I hear them good enough for good reception. Because it's high 11 meters, there are some deep fades sometimes, slow deep fades, but the majority of the broadcast is pretty good. Um, and there are some stations not broadcasting here on frequencies that I have a decent receive. Some of them very good too. One of them, NHK Radio Japan. I get their French and English pretty well here at the times that they broadcast. There's the afternoon French broadcast, and there's the late night broadcasts also. Usually coming in quite well, as long as they're coming in. The problem is just with the lower signal levels that they give us. If it's noisy where you are, that's the problem. Inverse square law. When I listen to an international station, is there an easy way to transcribe 15 minutes of information to send that for a QSL card? Just write it down. Listen and write it down. Some have forums on their websites. I know some stations have forums on their websites, but just to take the time to listen and give the details, the best details you can give that will have at least a few pointers that you were actually listening to them. Yeah, that's the definite thing. International UTC time and all of that, and which time is the best to listen to. When I hear somebody saying, "Well, I tried to tune shortwave at 1 p.m. in the afternoon," well, that's not the best time in the day to listen to shortwave. That might explain why maybe you didn't have that many broadcasts. But noise is the biggest problem, which is sad. Radio Kid, nice to have you here. Glenn Danzler, nice to have you here in South Carolina. Yeah, it's the equivalent of light pollution for amateur astronomers. Definitely. It's exactly the same thing, but in a visual way. If we could see noise, it would probably show up like pollution in big cities. Timothy Gunter, Radio Havana, Cuba came in clearly on 11760 in the afternoon when I took a walk, listening to jazz on Spanish language broadcasts. 6 megahertz is difficult now, and I saw a video on the site about how, yeah, the 6 megahertz is the transmitter is terrible, terrible. You see that blocker die? You got that for you. They're the best radios for under 50 because you don't have that problem we have. But if you would be in like a place like me, you would not even think about putting these radios in the top 20. That's the problem. It's very dependent on where you are. So, I see people that like it probably don't have all of these problems with it. Because AM breakthrough is a major issue. It's not even a small problem. It's a major issue that prevents you from even listening to a lot of shortwave broadcasts. An example here, if I don't place it correctly, 31-meter band, forget it. You only hear the station plus the mixed in of an AM radio station with it, just to give you an idea. So it really all depends on probably where you are, how strong AM stations are, maybe even the frequencies used by the AM station. It could be frequency dependent one, but it renders the radio almost useless on some bands, unfortunately. When I was outside, it's even worse. When I brought the radio with me at a place not far from here in the park, the fact that I'm outside where AM radio signals are even stronger, it was useless. Useless. The D109 and the D109 WB were zero interesting on shortwave. Mark Willard, do you have any insight to using an MFJ pan adapter on an old school shortwave? Is it worth the effort? Too expensive to purchase an ICOM R8600. Yeah, it could be if you want to take the time to do it, and there's there's some fun to it. Personally, with all the work that it requires, I'd get an SDR. I'd simply get an SDR. What else do we have? Robert Cross, yeah, the Zoom is January 27th for anybody that has contributed. January 27th at 20 hours UTC, Robert. Nice to have you on board. Radio Kid, in your opinion, is the XH Data D808 audio as good as the D109 audio? I'm having a hard time springing for a radio that doesn't use standard size batteries. First of all, if you're thinking between one or the other, go to the D808 directly and do not even think about the D109. You're getting a much better radio. But in terms of audio, if we just talk audio wise, the D109 has the best audio of all the portable radios of that size. That is definitely a big plus, the D109. But for the rest, get the D808 and forget the D109 if you want to get a radio and you're thinking between one or the other. You have a better radio in the D808. What else do we have? Mason, which BBC World Service would bring back the the I remember that on 5975 at the top of the hour in the 80s, listening to the BBC. definitely. Ricky, very fortunate that my region is pretty much behind RNZ specific primary target area. I received them least this time of year. Best reception on 7390 from around 13 UTC until fade out. OG Railways, the DWD is broadcasting RTTY and fax weather broadcast the whole day and 9 on multiple frequencies. Yep. They even have voice broadcasts. They have a couple of voice broadcasts in the 49-meter band. One frequency, I think, is 5910, which is kind of interesting. My C Crane C3 has the alert feature. Yeah, if you have a C Crane Skywave SSB and the new one, you also have weather alert on them. Jean Arash, salut, nice to have you here. If there is an alert, you'll get it with a cell phone, but not with a laptop. Why don't they make it for all devices? I guess they're thinking that because most people will have a cell phone, which is very portable everywhere you are, and a laptop or a computer will be, for a lot of people, something that is only in a specific location. Your cell phone, your smartphone, you got it with you everywhere. You go outside, you got it in your shirt pocket or whatever. So it's a better, you'll reach more people because everybody has their phones with them. Jonathan, I'm a shortwave radio hobbyist and listen to NHK, CRI, BBC, and others using my small radio with shortwave, but I used a long wire to boost the signals. Yeah, a lot of us do that. Today, a lot of us also use the MLA 30, which is also a great alternative. So Blogger Die gets some good NHK signals in Virginia. RJ Dakota, rabbit ears. Yep, rabbit ears, definitely a good idea. That's for sure. I'll try to catch up a little bit. Yeah, NHK in Japanese. But you've got a few other times when they, because that's the one from France, which is very powerful, by the way. It's amazing how it, but it's also directed kind of towards us because there's directed, that 6105 kilohertz is directed to South America. So that's why we also enjoy a pretty strong reception there. But there are a few times that they make it with a decent signal. One is around 0530 UT. I have the French one that I listen to at 2030 on 9855. So, it's what else do we have? Let's check it out. Radio kit, I put in aftermarket Panasonic radio that had weather band in my old Nissan pickup. Kind of missed that radio. What else do we have? Jonathan says NHK on 17810, 15280, 17815 in Japanese, English, and Burmese. Yeah. Anything else? Let's check it out. Glenn Danzer putting a battery and solar panel charger in a small inverter just to keep the Wi-Fi up during the terrible thunderstorms we get in South Carolina, May through October. So let's gonna check it out. What else do we have here? Let's go. Estoy bien, gracias. So what I do with my com radio CR1 is use it with a sub RX to my ICRE 500, for example, to check a shortwave station that's on the air on two bands at the same time. Cool, cool. I always have tons of radios running at the same time, so I can check out 8 different stations. People would find me crazy sometimes, like having 6 portables on the same frequency, listening to. The worst is when you get, when I like put an SDR on the channel and then put a portable on the same channel, and there's that slight delay in the audio that drives people crazy. Well, most of them do actually have their broadcast, because the problem with the broadcast, this is the thing with the broadcast, is that most have actually a Eastern North America and a Western North America service, like Romania and Turkey. They have the Eastern North America and they have a Western North America service. They have two definite services. There could be a couple that have only they call it North America. So they don't focus on the East or the West. North America is pretty big. So, of course, for anything in Europe, you know, it's the same thing. It's like for anything in Europe, what comes out of Europe is tough in the West Coast, but easy on the East. And the other way around is that anything coming from Asia is is easy on the West Coast, but it's a tough one on the East. So it's kind of interesting. But a lot of them do. But even on there, I've seen a lot of. I know Ricky. I've seen a few posts from him, like trying like Romania or Turkey on their Western North America service, and it's kind of a hit or miss. It's kind of a tough one. It seems that the distance there, and it's kind of difficult. Um, you know, Galba Radio Ruma 7380 kilohertz. David says something I also often do with the multicoupler is to leave the CR1 on an aviation HF frequency while I monitor another such frequency or tune medium wave or short wave. Yeah, sometimes what I do is I've done it a few times, put 3 or 4 radios on the most active um, air traffic control frequencies like New York and Gander. And it's kind of fun because if you stay there with one radio on one frequency, you might have periods of times you don't hear much traffic. But if you have 4 or 5 radios on 4 or 5 different frequencies from the air traffic control, you almost have a constant traffic going on because there's more, the different frequencies that are active at different times and so on. It kind of makes it more interesting, more fun to listen to. Jim's radio check. I wonder why NOAA weather radio does not alert for winter storms. Well, I think it has to do because here we have. So here's the thing. I understand what you're saying, but it's like a winter storm is an event that technically, unless there's some specific component to it, is not necessarily a life-threatening immediate problem. It's like a severe thunderstorm or tornado or approaching hurricane is such a dangerous thing compared to a snowstorm that, yeah, there is some risk in there and some problems, but you usually aren't, it's not threatening. Even an ice storm, you're going to have a bad day, but you're probably not going to, even if you don't have electricity and all of that, you're probably not going to die from it. where a severe thunderstorm with very high winds, a hurricane, or even like a tornado, that could kill instantly a lot of people in a very short amount of time. So I guess that's why they dose where they're going to actually put an alert. They don't want to annoy you too much. What's going to happen if they annoy you with everything is that you're going to just shut it down. That's the other problem that we're having with that is, okay, if we start alerting for weather, some more snowstorms, and things like that, people are going to stop using them. They're going to just say, wow, this is annoying. It's alerting me about a snowstorm. And they're just going to shut it down. The efficiency of these radios is get the alert to the exact time when it's very important to alert everybody because it's a life-threatening event, but don't annoy everybody with things that are more down to earth, relaxed things. HS and H, nice to have you on board. Hans, PT0AEB from the Netherlands. Well, welcome aboard. This is from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, in North America. So nice to have you on board, my friend. The Wind 1960, nice to have you here. And snowy central New York. Craig Martinenti says, love this show. My pleasure. So I'm here for that. David says use a modded MLA30. Main changes is I use a 1 meter Mobius loop. And so cool. Shortwave archive. Shell, what type of external antenna would you recommend and how to get it plugged into a radio on the second floor of a house? So here I live on what is almost a third floor. It depends. First of all, you got to, so is it your home? Is it rented? Is it a condo? What is it? Will depend. That would actually change how you might bring in the antenna, first of all. So in my cases, I'll throw it out a window and then go attach it to wherever I want to attach the wire, for example, if I take a wire antenna. But I'll bring it in with a coax because you don't want to have a bare wire getting in and getting all the noise from your home. So the wire is going to be attached between 2 points. Then I'll tap that into the central connector of a coax. I'll try to ground in some way the shield so that it blocks the noise the most possible. Grounding is another aspect in a complex thing. Usually what I'll do, I'll just simply put the shield into the metal frame of the balcony, which seems to do a job that it blocks noise quite a lot. It's kind of some form of grounding. Now, how to get it in? Well, it depends what you are capable of doing. So you bring it in usually with a coax, a shielded cable. Very important. If it's your home, well, you can drill a hole through the wall somewhere near where your shack is by being careful not to hit anything. And then you just, seal it off to make sure that the rain doesn't get in and anything, just like they do with cable TV, and put the coax there. What I do, because I don't want to do a hole in the, I could if I wanted, and it would probably be okay and pass, but this is not my home, so it's just rented. So basically, I don't want to drill holes or do things that I know it's probably not going to do it, but it could get me in trouble technically. So what I do in my case here, I deal with the fact that, yeah, it might make my office a little cooler, but I keep the window, it's about 1 inch open. And so all the coax and all the cables I need to get in are going through the window here. They're sliding windows. And I put some So I have some kind of soft, foamy type material. So when I take that and I close the door on the foam so that it isolates as much as possible from the exterior. So technically, so my two windows here are about an inch. All the cables are coming down from the corner. The rest, two pieces of foam, the window closes on, and I'll probably add um, duct tape over it to kind of complete the seal of it. And it actually works very well. There's no rain coming in when the rain comes that way. I barely feel that there's a little bit of cold air coming in sometimes. Not enough to annoy me, anyways. And it works fine. And it's a solution that for here is the best solution possible. So it all depends. Some might buy because on Windows like I have, they sell shielded, kind of very flat shielded cables that are flat enough that if you're careful, you can actually close the window on them. And I know some use that on different types of windows. And it also depends on what types of windows you got. If you got this up and down sliding windows or the side sliding windows like I got here, depending on how it is, how the home is made. And then, outside, what do you put outside as an antenna? The first thing that I always tell everybody is because you probably have some lying around anyways, it'll cost you probably nothing, is start by putting up a wire in your backyard or somewhere with between a tree and part of your home or whatever. Bring that in with a coax, a shielded coax. Start with that. If it's quiet environment where you are, maybe you live in a suburb or in a place that noise level is not much of a problem, this is maybe all you need. If that doesn't work, then it's if there's too much noise, then you get in, something like a magnetic loop, like in the MLA 30. It's probably your next best bet. You can put that outside and bring in the cable the way you want to bring it in. There's all sorts of ways to do it, and you just got, depending on if it's your home or not, and of course, condo people are in a big problem with all the all the rules. Can't put up an antenna, can do anything. You're almost tied down to not doing anything. So some actually have loops in just the window and seems to work decently. If I would be if here I would be told you cannot have an antenna outdoor, I would have a big plant and I'd have the MLA 30 hidden in it so that nobody will ever notice, except there's a plant on my balcony. That would be probably one thing. For a ham radio, that's a little more complex. But I would probably try to put the end-fed antenna somewhere on the ceiling. Here, this house is an old wooden house, so there's no attenuation of signals much. Inside is just that I'll get more noise from inside. But if I would be told that my end-fed can be in the back, I probably would put it in, and not in the same room I am because I'm too close of the RF. But this is the office. Maybe try to put it in my living room or the kitchen. A place where I know that when I'm operating, I'm not the same room. And that might actually do a decent job. I might get more noise, but I think it would still work decently as, a ham radio antenna for someone that can't put up any outdoor antenna. That's the other major problem. Sometimes we have rules, and a lot of you live in areas where there's rules of putting up an antenna outdoors is a very complicated thing. Mad Radio DX UK, nice to have you here. M7EIW. Greg Scherer picked up WRVA, crystal clear in South Illinois, late afternoon. Cool. Yes, surround sound. Surround sound air traffic control. KW1161 says, "Joel, to feed your radio addiction, turn on your radios." So sometimes people are probably going to find me real crazy, but I have tons of radios open at the same time, turned on at the same time. Sometimes on the same frequencies, sometimes different. But it's just funny. Dwayne, have you seen Double Loop from Cross Country in the UK? What's your thought? I've seen something. I don't know what to say. Actually, I would have to be tested and tried to see how well it is or not. OG Railways, do you prefer portable, stable stops, or SDRs? I think they all have their use. Um, if we let's say we fall into the I don't have any radios at all, and what will you get if you get one? My first purchase would be probably a good portable, because I often like to listen to radio outside. But if that is not something I want to do, um, then I would probably go with an SDR, because SDRs, I mean, look, I got fancy radios here. I got the ICOM. Behind me here, I got a Kenwood R5000. Here's my transceiver. Now, to be fair, it's partly SDR because it is an hybrid as transceiver, so there is a waterfall. That definitely is something I like about it. Um, but since I started using an SDR, a good SDR, I've been ignoring these radios. And the reason is an SDR brings you into a very different listening experience. And I think too many people are focused on certain things that they say, well, I don't want a SDR for this reason. One reason that I got so many times is, well, I don't want to be looking at a screen when I'm listening to Radio Romania. And my answer back to that is, you don't have to be looking at the screen to listen to Radio Romania. You just leave it on and do something else. That's all. It's like a radio. Same. If you're listening on a portable radio, are you staring at your radio all the time? No, you're listening. You might take a glimpse of the radio for something, but you're listening. Same for SDR. You look at it when you're tuning around the band stuff, like the radio. But the fact that there's a waterfall and that you could see signals up and down the frequency ranges you're tuning, it changes the whole experience. And I like that because it actually made me tune in to signals that I would totally have missed if it wasn't for the fact that I could see them pop up on the waterfall. So, it's like here, you look at stuff and you see these spikes go up. Well, let's lower this a little bit like this, so you'll see them even better. But when something's happening, you'll see spikes going on, and you'll see spikes on the left or on the right. So you see that things are happening and signals are popping up. So you can exactly go there directly and say, oh, what's that? What's this big peak down there that was appearing, or up there that was appearing? You can go and check it out. And that's something that on a radio like the ICOM, which is a good radio, well, you'll miss out. You'll miss out on some signals because it's focused on one frequency only. So. What else do we have? Shortwave archive. Could we end the interval with interval signals at the end of this live stream? We're gonna check it out. We're gonna see how things go, and we're gonna check it out. If not now, next time we'll maybe try it. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Joseph, nice to have you here from San Francisco Bay, California. Driving around and listening in. Finally got a chance to say hi. Tuning the bands with his Texan PL 358, 368. 1960. Did not want you to think I think you a small part in life. um, Good brand name external speaker for shorter listening. I don't know. A lot of people use different things. Some use Bose speakers. Some use all sorts of high quality speakers. Um, some use computer speakers, good quality computer speakers. It all depends. Maybe somebody in the chat can help our friend here if you're using external speakers with your radios. Ricky says, quirk about Romania in the winter. Their Western North America English services are broadcast with azimuth of no higher than 320 degrees, which points to the Midwest U.S., avoiding polar signal losses, perhaps. Um, could be, but I think, you know what? They are looking at, so the signal on shortwave when they're broadcasting goes like this, like a V shape. Maybe they're trying to focus the center of the V towards this, which is the closest thing to the center of North America, maybe. But there's all sorts of reasons that could be. It could be the way that it could be a technical thing about their antenna just not capable of any other azimuth point for that broadcast. It's like when I learned that KBS World Radio, we've been complaining about that 15575 frequency. KBS World Radio, I finally learned that the reason why they're on 15575 all the time is that they have only one antenna that's capable of reaching North America directly, and the transmitter on it goes from 14 to 16 megahertz. Can't tune anywhere else. So that's why they can't change the frequency, because that North American target area is on an antenna and a transmitter that can't tune anywhere else. So they just leave it there with what we see as kind of a bad winter time, usually. Jim's radio check. We had snowstorms where cars were stranded on Lakeshore Drive for 24 hours. Oh, yeah, there's definitely some really big storms for sure, but it's not in the same, it's not an immediate danger. It's more of a gradual thing that is going to happen. A tornado is like, oh, it's happening now. But an hour ago, you had no idea that there would be one. Where a snowstorm, we can almost say sometimes that idiots go out, even if they've been warned that you shouldn't be going out because a snowstorm's coming. You've been warned 24 hours or 48 hours before. Unlike tornadoes or severe thunderstorms, which are kind of, immediate dangers that half an hour ago maybe we're not even there. Joseph, warning to those who use Apple products. I recently bought a new MacBook, and the shortwave interference on certain bands is profound, even from across the room. Wow. That's interesting. Last time I had an Apple computer was a MacBook Pro, and it was pretty quiet back then. Actually, the screen wasn't. When I was close to the screen, it wasn't, but it wasn't bad. So it's sad to see that that's happening. Jonathan, when I was listening to HK World, the NHK on shortwave seems that 11815 frequency is being affected by radio blackouts due to solar flares, but also 17810 and yeah, well, solar flares will do a lot of blackouts, some radio blackouts. So definitely, and since you're listening from stationed from pretty far away, it's easy to interfere with. Okay, what else do we have? Um, mm, 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 mm. Oh, dear, always. I grounded my SDR laptop via external screens. Reduce, reduces noise quite okay. So we have people listening into Zoomer Radio on 740. Um, Marvin Motz, nice to have you here from the Japan Islands. Pretty cool. Yeah, and MLA 33. Joseph. Craig Martinetti, what are your favorite international shortwave radio broadcasters right now? I like listening to most anything that is in a language that I understand is usually something interesting, as long as it's not religious, and as long as most of the time it's not a music show. I'm not fond of, except there's exceptions to the rule, like um, Radio Nacional, Amazon, Brazil has some beautiful Brazilian music, but the um, the I'll like listening to most broadcasts. I find it interesting. So whether it's Voice of Turkey, Radio Romania. Radio Romania is an excellent show that I love listening to, where they go in the past and talk about the communist era Romania and how it happened. And so most of the broadcasters I'll listen in and find for the most part programs interesting. Radio Prague, via WRMI, so on. If the more they will talk about local things that is to do with their own country, the more interesting I'll find it usually. Um, but I like a lot of broadcasters and BBC World Service. I listen to the full 2 hours. That when propagation is good, listen to the full 2 hours on 25 900. Love that. It's they kind of go through world events, what's happening everywhere around the world. It's really interesting. Things like that. Um, what else do we have? RJ Dakota antenna, is it in high in trees or camouflage like on Hogan's Heroes? Ricardo, nice to have you here from Portugal. Joseph, that's all of us. Usually I'm running my shortwave and scanner radios at the same time. Robert Varner sometimes puts WWV and or CHU as background listening. We're all weird. That's why we are here together. It's as simple as that. How many radios I have? Wow. If I count all the radios, including the crappy ones, I am more than 100. More than 100. But really good ones are, it's less. Jim Gordon, hi from very cold and frosty Perth, Scotland. Is it colder in Quebec? We've had a little cold spell in the past couple of days. We've reached minus 15. I don't have my phone for the weather. We've reached minus 15. It's like, okay, it's minus 8 right now. So we've reached minus 15 Celsius, which is in, somewhere in the like 10 Fahrenheit or something. Even less, or close to 0 Fahrenheit. Last night or the day and the night before. Right now we're at minus 8 Celsius, which is like maybe in the 20s or something, even less. That's the coldest we've had yet this year. We haven't reached, because sometimes we can go to minus 30 easily. But this year, for now, it's been rather warm in general. Take care, Ricky. Always nice to have you here. Yep, they do make under window ribbon cables with coax connectors, so that could be used. Inverse square law to mean SDR is like having a spectrum analyzer. Yep, pretty much. Danielson thought it was the only crazy one having multiple radios on at the same frequency, but mainly to test performance differences. Yeah, you're not. You're not. We are. We're all crazy people. We're all a little crazy. What else do we have here? Patrick, yes, 53 ATT. Can you do a vid about 120-meter tropical band? That would be great in Slovenia. Yeah, well, there's not a lot to talk about on the 120 meters tropical band. I'm not even sure there's much out there. Let me just check the EIBI space listing. What does it show in the 2 megahertz? So 2 megahertz now is like mostly marine broadcasts. So what do we have? We have, well, we do have Korea, KCBS, Pyongyang. So North Korea, 2350 kilohertz. Australia has an irregular broadcast, Radio Simban, on 2368.4. There is a Brazilian station on 2470, apparently. Radio Cacique Sorocaba, Portuguese, from Brazil. So that's pretty much the only thing there is. The rest is all marine broadcast stuff like that. Of course, the time stations on 2500 kilohertz. There's almost nothing now compared to what used to be before. There's a Radio X irregular 2325 from Australia too. So it's interesting. But 120 meters is roughly, apart from the marine broadcasting part, it's roughly dead. It's mostly utilities now that you'll hear there. What do we have? So cheers, Danielson from Melbourne, Australia. Nice to have you here. KW 1161, yeah. What else do we have? Bill Mean, SDR waterfalls have really helped me understand the science behind various radio modes. What AM looks like compared to SSB, not to mention RTDY facts. Yeah, that definitely does make an interesting visual aspect. Seeing different modes on the waterfall does show you how different they all are. Madry Duty Exer, thank you for the tip. Don't forget, for those that have contributed, it 20 Saturday the 27th of January at 20 hours UTC is when the next Zoom meeting is going to happen for contributors to the channel. OG Railways tabletops are looking very nice, but they are expensive and can do as many things as an SDR can. SDRs, for me, if anybody would ask me if I have to buy a tabletop, an SDR, or a portable, I will probably say an SDR. Go SDR all the way. If it's, you can make a portable setup, it's more difficult. But if you listen at home all the time, If you're ready to get in, anyways, a tabletop radio, which mostly stays at home, get an SDR. You have a lot more bang for your buck, a lot more features for what you're going to do. When 1960s got an SDR, RSPDX, Burkhat 860 XLT modified, unit in 60, Radio Shack 2404 monitoring, all at the same time. David says to me, SDRs like the AirSpy HF Plus Discovery with all functionalities and SDR Sharp are ideal for deep DXing, but my hardware defined radios are great for the digital detox. Just me and my signals. Yeah, I want to have a digital detox. I'm going to be just me and my signals. Blogger Die uses a ribbon cable to bring the MLE30 outside, so that's a good use, definitely. Jim Gordon, yeah, well, now with the high solar activity, 15575 makes it a lot better than when solar activity is really low. Because when it's low, here it comes in only in the summer. I haven't checked 15575 lately, but I suspect that maybe with high solar activity, it might be making it, but I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody has listened to it lately for their English broadcast in North America. Yeah, well, it's just going to tell you that there's a winter storm coming. Jim's radio check. It's like any weather broadcast. It's going to tell you that, well, warning, snowfall warning, for example, stuff like that. Blogger Die, do any, whoops, do any, I just lost my spot, but the question was, do any SDRs out of the box receive DRM? I think there's a plugin for SDR Sharp or something for some of the SDRs. You have to play around with it. The software, from what I know, no software natively does DRM, but I think there's a DRM plugin for a couple of them. But DRM is dreadfully crazy. Yeah. And I would not go to an ELAD SDR just for DRM. Too expensive for nothing. But you do have plugins on some of the, but DRM is dreadfully. Craig Martinetti, yes, the chat room is saved. So if you watch it again on YouTube, you'll see the chat room go through. Absolutely. Bob's Old Records. Weird that I can pick up Japan from the Isidun relay when the transmitter in Japan would work as good or better. Yeah, it all depends on the question is all depends on the target area. If Japan would target from the Japanese transmitter site in Yamata directly to, say, the west coast of North America, you probably would hear it very well. This brings back to the times when relays were not very common. Back in the 80s, listening to Radio Japan was a challenge here on the East Coast because Radio Japan would be direct from Japan all the time. So it would require good propagation and the frequencies used and so on. So when I would hear Radio Japan, I was like jumping up and down because it wasn't as common as when now there's relays. So it comes to talking about what we said earlier, the signals from Europe that are kind of difficult on the West Coast, yet here on the East Coast, signals from Asia are difficult. It's a question of target area. It's a question of all sorts of things, but yeah, but that frequency on the 49 meter band is extremely good. I got to say. RJ Dakota listens to some great music from Radio Romania International. Yeah, lots of Romanian music. Yeah. Brought back their sports program. Cool. Um, I find ELAD to be too expensive today compared to a lot of stuff. Even people that have one, there's a few people that had one that say, they're good. That no, there's no question about that. But today's lower cost SDRs are so amazing that the difference isn't necessarily worth all the money. XFM Shortwave, nice to have you on board, my friend. Been a long time. Hope you are well. Torben Iverson says minus 15. Well, that's summer temp. Let's all go to the beach. Oh, wait, it's frozen. So minus 31 there. That's cold. We have warmer and warmer weather here over the last 10, 20 years. It's not the same anymore. Last year, maybe we had a little cold spell that went to minus 23, 24, a couple of days. That's pretty much it. Normal temperatures here in January, where it's end of January is the coldest here. And what should be the average temperature end of January is about minus 18 in the night and maybe minus 10 or 9 in the daytime, which is kind of the average temperature for January. We are in the two coldest months now coming. It's January and February. But yet, you look at the weather right now, and most of the days have been above that, and even close to just degrees Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit. Jonathan, when I tune to NK Shortwave, I tune to 11610 in Bengali, which receive in my home country. It's aimed to India and Bangladesh. Yeah, on 120 meters, I don't get much. I'll get I what I get is really the weather broadcast, like from the Canadian Canadian marine weather. Oh, definitely shortwave archive. Those interval signals were made some interesting patterns. No problem, Penny. Take care. Maynard Arrow, nice to have you here from Finland, minus 46. I I seem to, now that you're talking about it, I seem to have read in the news an item about you guys being in a very cold spell in the last few days. If I'm not mistaken, you guys are getting really, really cold weather. Rob A, what's a good entry level SDR? Never had one before. Um, Depending on how much you want to spend, you could, for me, the best entry level, I think, of all SDRs is the RSP1A from SDR Play, because you just plug it in, put the software, plug it in, works. It's a wide band frequency coverage, but it's maybe 120 US, something like that. There is the RTL SDR V4 that came out, which apparently is easier to install and work. That is in the 30-ish US dollars. It's surprisingly good for what it is at that price. If you don't want to spend too much money, but it has a little bit of quirks here and there. But that could be something. I guess that could be interesting. but for a, not too much of a problem and easy to install and work with. Easy is a big word because you do have to learn the software, but it all depends on how easy and how good you want it. But it starts from the RTL SDR V4, which, by the way, you need to make sure that you purchase from the correct place because there's a lot of fakes, and those fakes look exactly like the real deal, but they don't do shortwave and they don't work well. Um, where you can buy an RSP, the RSP1A from SDR Play, and in places like Ham Radio Outlet, major radio stores have them. Here in Canada, I know that Radio World has them. So, kind of easier to find a store to buy it. Um, Jonathan says KBS 9770 in English received in the Philippines via South Korea. The interval signal that started their broadcasts. Bob's Old Records. I missed Tropical Band DXing the way it was 40 years ago. Yeah. All the Africans. There's still quite an interesting mix of tropical band stations, though. But they're lower power. The higher noise we have is not a great, deal for us. It's not helping out. But somebody that really wants to kind of dive in, there's quite a few African stations left, and quite a few from mostly South America that are in there. But you gotta really have a good setup and low noise to get them. But the new Blogger Die, the new RTL SDR V4 is easier to install. Apparently, you don't have to do all the driver trick that makes it complicated to use the V3. Take care, Sylvie. Well, nice to have you here. What else do we have? RJ Dakota, I've seen Marine Band labeled on a lot of old portable radios 2.3 to 4. And yeah, there's a lot of that going on around that area. Rob, hey, the Kiwi SDRs, there's a new version 2 of the Kiwi SDRs that are out of stock right now, but apparently I actually am thinking about that. I know some of you have asked this from time to time, and the thing about it is, I got distracted here. So we were talking about QSDR. Yeah, there's a version 2 coming out because they were out of stock and they wouldn't sell anymore. But now there's a version 2 coming out. Apparently, it's out of stock temporarily. It will be back in stock soon. A lot of you have asked me, it'd be fun to have a radio to tune from your location. I was thinking of maybe putting a Kiwi SDR on a PC that I don't use, and have it on the Kiwi SDR listing for all of you that want to tune around with it to use it. It'd be plugged on my MLA 30 and the front yard and the balcony. So that is something that I kind of am thinking about. So David, yes, I actually really enjoy being able to leave my Surface tablet and phone aside and just tune around. Oh yeah, for sure. There's all that. I'm like, surrounded by computers and using computers all the time. But yeah, I find it kind of cool when I just take a portable and, beautiful day, take a portable radio outside in nature and just enjoy the beautiful weather. It's definitely a lot of fun. Midnight Arrow, that's cold temperatures. Youch. Youch. Yeah, Shortwave schedule app, but unfortunately, it's not available in the store anymore, and it's probably going to stop working at some point in a update for Android because the guy behind the Shortwave schedule app is not developing it anymore. There you go. So you're hooked. You need a computer. What I do if I do stuff outside, I do bring my tablet most of the time. I do have my smartphone, my Samsung smartphone, but most of the time I'll be on my tablet. Yeah, I'll be checking it out. Jim Gordon, when I check out KBS Seoul and 15575 at 14 UT, I usually listen to Voice of Korea Pyongyang 15245. It's usually stronger than KBS here in Scotland. Voice of Korea programming is very unusual and time warped. Yeah, and 15575, because 15245 might be a transmissions towards Europe. They have a lot of those from Pyongyang. While 15575 um, is mostly towards North America. Kamikaze 76, nice to have you here from West Michigan. What else do we have? Yeah, I saw something about that in the news. You guys were really, really getting hit by cold weather. So basically, what's happening is that it's warm here in Canada. That's because we're all pushing the cold to your side. So I'm sorry, guys. We decided we just wanted to push the cold on your side. Paul Muffet, nice to have you on board in North Texas. Bob's Old Records, -3 Celsius in New Mexico. That's cold for New Mexico, though. Mm-mm-mm. The problem with the RSP is that you do need the SDR Play driver, which reduces the amount of usable software. But the problem is that one of the big software that was using the RSP devices was cut off, and that's because the maker of the AirSpy HF Plus, when he purchased the software to run SDR Sharp, decided to push out competition. Upstate SWL says I'm Radio Outlet also likes to put the RSPs on sale frequently, so you can check that out. Midnight Arrow, it's a normal winter here, Finland, just a little colder than normal. Yeah, we'll see about that of V4, but apparently they're going to do more of them, so we'll see. Take care, Shortwave Archive. 80K, nice to have you on board. Yeah, Radio RSA from South Africa. That's pretty cool. I listened to them on their 11-meter frequency. Paul Muffet says shortwave was amazing in the 60s. The internet has spoiled us all. Always so very excited to hear Radio Moscow. Yeah, well, the internet doesn't spoil us because we're not listening to most of us are not listening most to the international or any broadcaster for the most part. There's a few that we might like. I will tune to BBC. I know some of you tune to our Radio Australia, but these are public, government broadcasters, public broadcasters, the ones that stay there for the most part. Most shortwave stations that disappeared everywhere. They're not on the internet. So the internet is not what spoils us at all. It's really that, for all sorts of reason, economic, and so on. And of course, like I would say, the noise floor is so high now that that's really what's killing shortwave more than anything else. And if they don't get letters from people listening, they won't continue broadcasting. The temperature itself does not affect the travel of radio signals. So on the shortwave, especially on the the low frequencies, like below 50 megahertz or something. Um, um, the thing is, the higher frequencies are what is affected mostly by weather and things like that. Technically, could it affect really high frequencies? Colder weather means, you know, the air contracts more. I don't know if that would have an effect. I've never seen an effect due to temperature itself, but there could be effects in very high frequencies in terms of when it's very humid, cloudy. Just look at satellite reception of TV signals, things like that. On the shortwave side, long wave side, medium wave side, zero effect, basically. Christian Marcoux, salut. J'espère que ça va bien. Nice to have you on board. Just lost my spot here. Quelle fréquence? So, on 6-1, non, pas c'est ça. OK, oui, je comprends maintenant. Christian. No, it's not 8:30 tonight. It's when I talk about the time, it's always UTC. I never use local time for any broadcast that I talk about. So from 20 to 20:30 UTC, which is 3 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. 9855. Usually there's a decent signal from NHK Japan in French. And it transmits, I think it's relayed from France now. But not, it's not our time. It's always UTC, Christian, when I talk about it. Keegan the Extra, nice to have you here from Northwest Arkansas. What else do we have? Darwin says, who said Canadians were nice people? Radio Kid, can you run SDR on a tablet? That would make it portable, right? Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's kind of tough, honestly. So, Two Broke Tim. First of all, in the last 3 or 4 years, we lost pretty much no stations, almost no stations on shortwave. And it's not true they're going to the internet presence, because most of them, when they stop, they just stop. The ones that stay on the internet were the big broadcasters. Radio Australia was a big broadcaster. It's a government or public broadcaster. But all the small shortwave stations and all the stations on shortwave in general do not have an internet presence at all. So they're not moving to the internet. It's not true. They're just getting out because they don't see why they should continue. Sometimes it could be lack of listeners, And it's also the biggest thing about shortwave is, explaining to, you know, if your country's finding ways to save money in the budget, what's the thing you're going to look at? You're going to look at, why are we broadcasting to an international audience? Doesn't, it's why we do that. Why are we spending millions of dollars for that? So it's an easy cut because nobody complains except us that we might be losing a station here or there. But most stations are, we're in the last 5 years, we're in a moment where losing, there's really not, what's there is staying there. And actually, there's an increase. Even if you look at what shows up in all the relays popping up on WRMI, there even is more broadcasts on shortwave now than there was 5 years ago. For the most part, a lot of stations have decided to use relays, which is a good idea. And honestly, if you are to shut down shortwave because the transmitter side costs too much, well, think of a relay. Relay via WRMI doesn't cost much, and they'll get you to North America definitely. Yeah, it'll get you to Europe and parts of the world too. But look at all the stations that were gone. So the streaming on the internet has been more than 20 years now. Look at every station that's gone from 2000 to now, and you'll see, to broke Tim, that 90% are nowhere to be found on the internet. When they shut down, they shut down. And so-called radio waves are visible. I think that's because you've been standing in the cold too long. uh, so for a tablet, SDRs can run on Windows tablets. There's been a few things that can run on Android with SDR Touch, but it's complex and not all devices work well with it. It depends on what you have. So, no problem, Paul Muffet. Yeah, interval signals. Yep. John, nice to have you here. WPE4KNC. Happy New Year. Blogger Die, for shortwave being in decline, there's certainly a bounty of receivers. Well, that has to do with, depending on the market you are. That has to do with the fact that you in Asia, shortwave is still very popular. In Asia, there's tons of radios being sold there. That's why the entry point of radios are at such a low price point, because that's what people are buying. People are not going to buy. I'd be curious to see numbers. I doubt that the Texan PL N990 and H501 sell that much. Crazy people like us bought one, but I don't think they're not top sellers. I think what's a top seller is like, PL330 or the XH Data D808, things like that might be, and even lower than that. The reason they get out at D109, XH Data gets that out, or things like that, is because that's probably a price point where a lot of people buy it. But it's really the noise that's killing shortwave more than anything else. And like I said at the beginning, if you're a program listener, you probably want to be listening to a program in a decent condition. And if there's too much noise, you're going to get tired of listening. You're not going to be there. I'm sure there's a much higher part of decline with the rising of the noise and the station going away for X reason than the internet could be accountable for. And the reason for that, if you look at the decline was fast in the 90s of shortwave stations. The internet wasn't there for streaming in the 90s. Nobody was streaming until very late 90s, early 2000. And so all the stations gone from 1990 to say 1998, the internet is zero accountable for that. And that was a big chunk of stations that got there. There were more stations that were killed from the end of the Cold War than anything else. And there were a lot more stations that died from 1990 to 1999 than after that. Because after 1999, although there were more stations than today, there was still a lot of stations that were already gone. And the internet is zero responsible for that. So what happened from 2000 to 2020 has the same effect. It's the internet has zero reason for that. It's once again decline of listenership. A lot of it has to do with what? Not the internet. The rise of the noise. And as stations in the 90s were going away, I'm sure there's quite a few people that just went away also because it's like, oh, my favorite station's gone. So as the stations go, well, people listening will also go. And as the noise rises, that also lowers the number of stations you're hearing. All of that together, it's perfect mix to make people go away and just stations then realize, well, nobody's listening. Because that's the thing. Nobody's listening. You know, if I'll give you an idea, Radio Romania does have its programs also available as podcasts on their website. If the internet is such a huge thing where people go to, why is it that they read the same 5 letters of the same 5 people writing in every single time they have the letterbox? And all of that, nobody in those letters, no one. I never heard a Voice of Turkey, a Radio Romania, or other broadcaster read a letter and say, he's listening to our stream online. Never. Why? Because nobody listens to the stream online. I tell you, that is not a thing. There are a few streams that people will go to because the public broadcaster, it's a major broadcaster and they keep an online presence. Once again, the BBC or Radio Australia, things like that. But nope, nobody listens to the internet for stream stuff. You two broke 10. You mentioned once World Radio Network, and you might be doing that. And there are people doing that, definitely. But that's this big compared to what shortwave was at a certain point in time. So it's more lack of listeners that are making stations go away, and lack of listeners is several factors. You know, and part of it is stations that were already gone by when we got to the year 2000. You know, in 2000 we had still a handful of interesting stations like Radio Norway, Radio Sweden were there. Radio Netherlands still existed, Radio Canada International. But what was left was still a handful of what we've seen from 1990. The Cold War ending hurt shortwave terribly in terms of the number of stations on the air. Pas de problème, Christian. Oh, that's for sure, Jay Dakota. That's for sure. They know that they have to, you know. Bob Lewin, nice to have you here from snowy New Jersey. Let me try to get other stuff. Yeah, the sun stays low here too in Montreal. At this time, with the sun being so low, I can hear like WCBS 880 even in mid afternoon, which is not something in the. What else do we have? Let's check it out here. What else do we have? RJ Dakota, cousin Brucey comes every Saturday night on 770 WABC. That is a cool thing. That's a cool show, I gotta say. Moon Vision, traveling to Southeast Asia next week, taking my PL330. Be interesting. You're gonna have a lot of stuff there. You're gonna see how the bands are crazy. Matt wrote a letter to Radio Havana Cuba once, but they never got back to me in any way. That said, it was in response to some kind of poll Arnie Coro was taking. Yeah. Radio Havana Cuba, um, even here in Canada, when I would write to Havana Cuba, it was a hit or miss thing. You'd have one letter that got through and one letter that I never got a reply. I think they weren't very good at it. Probably don't have staff or anything, so it was kind of complicated. Because it was it was sketchy. Even in the 80s, even in the 80s, I remember that writing Radio Havana Cuba, if I got a reply, was extremely slow. It was like 6 months, 7 months later. I remember getting a new Happy New Year card in like March. Like, wow, that's slow. So I don't know. I think a lot of the stuff doesn't work very well right now, and I mean, what happened to what happened to the transmitters and all? It's like it's going down the drain. Yeah, but you have to Bob's Old Records. When you go online, you have to choose BBC World Service to have the World Service, or else you'll get the local stations like BBC Four and so on. But they have a separate stream for World Service, which is what is on shortwave. Bob Lewin, do you remember in the early 80s on shortwave when every Soviet bloc country talked about how wonderful life was? Oh, well, there was all sorts of, there was all sorts of things that, the propaganda of the day. Propaganda of the day. Matt says Channel 6 seems dead. Well, here I got a nice big peak right now. So it's not dead here yet. So it's still going on here. Let me check something. I want to check LRA 36 on 15476. Yeah, I'm hearing it. Not very strong, but LRA 36 from Antarctica is on 15476. I'm hearing it now. And actually, I made my first amateur radio contact with a Ukrainian research station in Antarctica this week or last week, 2 weeks ago, I think. First time I get an amateur contact with Antarctica. It was so cool. It was the Ukrainian research facility. So this was kind of really, really cool. Erwin Answer, nice to have you here from Melbourne, Australia. I did say I want to have QSO with you. Well, I'm available now. Let me know which All-Star Echo Link we can do VK3 EAN. Yeah, we'll have. You need to send me an email. Let's send me an email and we'll arrange a time when it's convenient. Official Shortwave radio at gmail.com, and we'll arrange something so that it's more convenient. Yeah, Bruce. Well, yes and no. Blogger die. Yes and no for a simple reason. Um, there's been solar cycles forever, and the peaks like in the 60s and the low solar cycles of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That never really hurt shortwave because if you choose the frequencies correctly, even in low solar activity, you're getting to the target audience. Stations were there in low solar activity too. For me, I don't think solar activity hurts that much in what shortwave has to bring us. Um, it's much more. It's at other places that things are happening. Yeah, Radio Havana, Cuba is it's Radio Havana, Cuba. When we talk about the death of shortwave, um, when you talk about the death of shortwave, um, the number of stations that what happened is just that disappeared is what happened is exactly what's happening with Radio Havana, Cuba. Is the transmitters are going dead, and someday they're off to never come back. That's what happened to the majority of Africa on shortwave stations. That they maintained their shortwave transmitter as long as they could, and when it dropped dead, it dropped dead, and they had no parts to repair. They nothing they could do, no money. So a lot of stations went that way, and a lot of stations around the world, even bigger stations, went that way. Transmitters were getting too old. Do we replace transmitters? It's going to cost a lot of money. Let's just shut down. So they let the transmitters, you know, go to as the end to expire. Italy, right? Italy, when they shut down, I don't know if you guys remember, they had a high pitched whining tone, which was really bad. Transmitters were getting, out of whack. I'm sure it's part of the reason they went out and said, yeah, I would need to spend this amount of money to repair the transmitters. And they just said, okay, well, shut it down anyways. That's going to be better. you know, it's a question. Is it useful also? For some, the obvious reason is not directly there. How useful is it for my service to be on and talk to the world? Oh yeah, there's still propaganda today for sure, for sure. As Matt says, solar cycles shouldn't matter. Stations know about it and they just adjust. That's it. Solar cycles don't. I always say it when somebody says, "Well, now we're going to solar minimum." I've heard hams saying, "Oh, solar minimum." I'm going to come back. I'm going to shut down to my shack and come back in a few years when things come back up, which is just shows you know, just shows the fact that you don't understand anything about radio. Because I say it all the time. Some of my best DX ever I've made in solar minimum. It affects solar activity affects the higher frequencies a lot. But when you're down to the 49-meter band, whether it's high or low, if you choose the correct pattern and power and everything, you're there all the time. You're there even, and high or low. It doesn't matter. It's just stations will pack themselves more in the 6 megahertz, 49-meter band, things like that. So there'll be more stations jam packed together, but they usually make it. I mean, a great example of that. Has everybody ever complained that you didn't receive Radio Australia, whether high or low solar activity? I don't think anybody's going to raise his hand. It was always there. It was here in North America, particularly, pretty much the furthest international broadcaster that we could hear. It was there at high solar activity. It was there at low solar activity. It was always there. Pretty much, there could have been days with tougher reception, but it was always there. The solar activity cannot be accounted for as breaking why stations are going off. Radio Kid says, I've been noticing that my Texan PL606 has been missing listenable signals between the ATM designated frequencies, especially in 41 meter band when I hand tune the radio. You need to have decent reception, and all radios don't have same the same sensitivity on the ETM scans. And don't forget, when you're scanning, you could miss out on a station that's reasonably strong, and you're like, why did it miss? Remember, signals on shortwave do ups and downs on the propagation all the time. If that ETM scan passed on the frequency while there was a fade out of the station, it's going to jump over it. It's not going to say there's nothing there, but you'll find, yeah, there's something there. So, do an ETM scan 10 times in 10 minutes, and you'll see that they'll come back with, there's going to be, like, the main stations are going to be there, but there's going to be tons of them that are also not going to be there, or there's going to be some that weren't there before, they're there now. And it has to do a lot with also the fading of signals, depending on when the the scan passed through the frequency range. If there was a fade in the station, you're missing out on it, but it was there. It's just that you got into a fade. And like I said, ETM is not equal on all radios. Some are better at it than others. Hey, Dwayne, 73. Take care, my friends. So, KW960. I'm surprised that Cuba hasn't borrowed the China radio transmitters located in their country. Yeah. Well, they don't. The Chinese broadcasts are not on Chinese transmitters. The Chinese broadcasts in Cuba are from Cuban transmitters. That's why they're sounding as crappy as the Cuban ones. Um, I don't think there was ever a Chinese transmitter sent to Cuba. They just used the Cuban ones, and it shows. China radio via Cuba doesn't sound good. It sounds weak or distorted sometimes. They're using the same crappy transmitters. Maybe they're trying to give the best ones that they know, but I don't think there's Chinese transmitters in China, in Cuba. That I would see. The only way that Radio Vena Cuba could survive would be if they reach out and say, look, we have a hard time. If you would send us a few Chinese transmitters that we could set up, you'll sound better to North America and everywhere. And we'll be back with Radio Havana Cuba and those transmitters too. Yeah, Voice of Nigeria. That's another one. Transmitter problems. Bob Lewin, why did HCJB from Quito, Ecuador shut down? That's an interesting one. There was actually a story on that on Wavescan, and it was very, very interesting. So, what happened? David Snyder, nice to have you here, by the way. And 5935 WWCR just signed in English, which is usually one of the. If I have one signal that overloads my radios on 49 meter band, 5935 WWCR usually does it. Leontin Kupar, nice to have you here from Romania. So what happened to HCJB is that HCJB arrived to a point where they were actually warned by the government, the Ecuadorian government, that there would be a expansion of the airport in Quito. And that expansion of the Quito airport meant that planes would be flying over the transmitter site in PIFO. So um, they got scared that the high powered transmissions from these antennas would interfere with planes passing nearby. So what happened is they told him we got to move the transmitter site. And I mean, HCJB had a huge transmitter site. It was really a big thing. So at first they thought, well, okay, let's explore where we're going to go. And now keep in mind that HCJB had its own transmitters, antennas, power station. They had built their own power station because the power grid in Ecuador would not have been able to give enough electricity for what they needed for the shortwave broadcasts. So they purchased land at another spot and looked at it. And after a few years, they realized that it was such a big enterprise to go and rebuild at that new place everything. And they said that also where they had purchased, it was kind of complicated to reach. So that is the main reason for HCJB leaving. Um, in the interview, they said that if they didn't have to, dismantle and move the transmitter site, um, he kind of hinted that maybe HCJB would still be on the air today. But because it was millions of dollars to invest to change the transmitter site from PIFO to that new place, that's where the decision was taken that it was not worth doing that, and that they would focus on other places. That's why they have Reach Beyond Australia, which now focuses to Asia and the Pacific. They thought that was a better thing. Don't forget that HCJB had one role, is trying to get people, you know, believe in Jesus, and he was a Christian broadcaster. That's the number one goal of HCJB. So they probably figured out, well, maybe North America and Europe and all of that is not the place anymore to do that kind of thing. So they built Reach Beyond Australia, which used most of the transmitters that the PIFO transmitter site had. There were transmitters that were built in the US by the HCJB crew there and then sent to PIFO in Ecuador. And when they built Reach Beyond Australia, they took the transmitters and the antennas from PIFO, and that's they ended up there. And a few of them ended up in Africa. If you look at the Liberia station ELWA, which is still on the air, Radio Africa, they are using some old HCJB transmitters that were sent to them. So that's pretty much what happened. Is they got into a point where moving all of it was just too expensive, wasn't worth it anymore. And they looked at the numbers. I'm pretty sure they looked at how many letters do we get from listeners, and they did say that from about 1985 onward, every year they had less and less mail coming from listeners, which means that there was less and less people listening in. Once again, there was no internet back then. People were moving away, for different reasons. Once again, maybe because some of the stations were gone already, and the slowly moving noise levels, stuff like that. So that's pretty much what happened to HCJB. They do still have one transmission. If you want to hear HCJB direct from Ecuador, they have one transmission left. It is for the local population there, and it's on 6050. In the evening, when propagation isn't too bad, you might actually get it. There are a few nights they have those Ecuadorian music shows, I can tell you when I hear the Ecuadorian music on that frequency, I instantly recognize HCJB. It's like I get nostalgic. So that's pretty much the story there. So what else do we have? Just go down. Yep, fading of signals. Pirate music on 6925. Let's check it out here. I'm going to check it on the icon. Yeah. Six nine two five, definitely a pirate. I'm hearing it on the icon with the MLA 30 here. Um, oh yeah, HCJB was great. They were all they were all their signal was always pretty good in general. Matt says transmitter sites aren't all equal either. I imagine the old site in Quito was magnificent, just like Sackville was for RCI. Yeah. I mean, that was a major enterprise. They had built, imagine that, the money they put there, and they had built shortwave transmitters, antennas, a power station, their own power station. They were actually giving power to the Ecuadorian power grid because they had so much power to give away. They had extra power there. It was a crazy enterprise when you think about what HCJB was, for sure. Jay Dakota still remembers receiving Radio Netherlands from each of their relay stations. Yeah, that was kind of fun. The relay stations when they were from Bonaire. I remember Voice of Free China, which became after that Radio Taiwan. Um, that was a breakthrough thing. Voice of Free China was relayed via Okeechobee, Florida, which back then was owned by Family Radio, WRFI, WYFR. Before it was changed to WRMI. So it's pretty crazy. Jim Gordon, concerning the Eastern Bloc propaganda in the 70s, 80s, as undergraduate student of political science, shortwave stations helped me get my degree. Thank you, Joe Adamov. Yep. And let's face it, not all the Eastern Bloc countries were equal. Some had relaxed programming. Like Radio Berlin International was not too bad. Radio Moscow was kind of a relaxed station. It was listenable. You had some great stuff in there. You had the propaganda for sure, but there was great stuff in there. And others were almost unlistenable, like Radio Tirana in Albania. It was just too extreme, you know. Um, yeah, Joe Adamov, Bob Lewin. Yeah, no problem. It's interesting little story about the demise of HCJB and Quito. Bob WA2SQQ was listening. I always listened to 15115. Yeah, their main frequency I was tuned to most of the time, 9745. I think that was, for me, that's as engraved in my memory as 9580 for Radio Australia. Yeah, 11745. Remember that. 15155 also was one. Start an Airman. We're all going to hell. Oh man. Joseph says nothing on 6925. Yeah, seems to be maybe more like an East Coast thing. Oh man. Bob says Radio Pay Kings always send Mao's Red Bible with their QSL. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember. Pretty cool. Ajay Dakota says Radio Moscow was like Miller Lite, a lighter version of communism. Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't a shove into your face thing. It was, bits of stuff here and there that goes with their communism, but also cool stuff and great music. They had great music shows and it was interesting stuff. And I mean, Radio Moscow for me is not a is a good souvenir of shortwave listening. I still remember the first time that I'd send a letter to Radio Moscow, get a reply by mail, and it says, "Listen in at this time, these days and times. We are going to answer your question on the air." And I mean, as a what, 13, 14-year old kid that I was, I don't know how exciting that was. It was so exciting to just know that, hey, I'm going to listen. I'm going to hear my name on Radio Moscow. Everybody listened. I told my mom, my dad, everybody was like, okay, it's now. Yeah. Let's just hope the frequency propagates well. But boy, that was, and I still remember my question. I still remember my question, my first question. When I wrote to them for the mailbag show, I asked them how many Canadian tourists go into the USSR every year. That was my question. And I was surprised to know that they didn't have an exact number. I remember that they did say that there were some Canadians going to the USSR on visit, but that they couldn't give me an exact number of how many, which kind of surprised me because I was like, well, you must be checking out who's going in and out, or they just didn't want to tell us. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to tell me. Nobody was going. Craig Martinetti, I went to an HCJB tour when I was young. I was allowed to sit in on several of their shows or one live. I was interviewed on their show. I was nervous. Wow, that's cool. That's cool. Thank you, Rob, for the donation. The Zoom is on the 27th, Saturday the 27th at 20 hours Universal Time for the Zoom. And the link for to get in will be sent a few days before. Oh yeah, Radio Moscow was everywhere. It's like you could listen to them everywhere. I remember the hams, the amateur radio operators on 40 meters going nuts because Radio Moscow was like on 10 different frequencies inside the ham bands and actually outside of the official 40-meter band of international broadcasts. A lot of them were like, 7,100, 7,200, and so on, just crazy. Paul Muffet listened to Radio Prague, Czechoslovakia. Got a QSL kind of received their magazine, I believe it was called Czech Life Today. I think I got one of those magazines back in the day. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, 1161. At the time, I would have taught 500 Canadians went in, but only 15 went back. Oh, man. But, that was the question. That was my curiosities. How many Canadians go to the USSR, actually? Are there people from Canada going to the USSR for some reason? And and of course, the answer was Joe Adamov. Joe Adamov answered it. And I sent another one later that also was answered, but I don't remember that second question. Probably because it was the first question, and I do still remember being, like jumping up and down, knowing that I'll be heard on Radio Moscow. But I don't remember the second question. And there was a lot of these stations that had these interesting things back then, like Radio Sofia, Bulgaria. I think if you send in like 50 or 100 reception reports in a certain amount of time, you had a certificate. I remind you, I was member of the Radio Budapest Shortwave Club in Hungary. because I had followed the number of reception reports you needed to send in and follow through. And if you did it, you were part of Radio Budapest Shortwave Club. I remember my call was VE1214 R/RB. Bob Lewin, Radio Moscow's announcer, Vladimir Posner, had the best American accent, still runs a restaurant in Moscow. Oh, wow. Wow. It's crazy. Their English was good. And what surprised me, and they worked hard on knowing who you were, because when a diploma, yes, Upstate SWL, it was a diploma, the Radio Sofia diploma. And I remember, because when I would write to shortwave stations, I mean, my name, Gilles Letourneau, was like massacred all over the place. Nobody could pronounce my name. It was no one. And Radio Moscow had it perfectly all the time. So I'm pretty sure they went into the language services and it was like, what language is this name and how do you pronounce it? When they would go on the air, my name was pronounced exactly as it was supposed to. That always impressed me of Radio Moscow. They worked hard on making things perfect. Because on other stations, like, I barely could understand it. I knew it was probably me because it was a letter from Canada from a Gillis or whatever. It's like Gillis and whatever Giles. They were like, trying their best, of course, but I was impressed with Radio Moscow having it perfect all the time. Oh yeah, Jim Gordon, Radio Tirana was crazy. It was like that was the if it was the most communist of the communists. It was like really really harsh programming. It was I apart from getting reception reports and being happy to hear Albania. I don't think Radio Tirana was something I'd listen to. It was unlistenable because it was just too rough. Radio Sofia, Bulgaria. Yep. No problem, Sergeant Rock. Bob's Old Records, CBC Northern Service. Yep. 9625 kilohertz. CBC Northern Service. And that was kind of nice. I remember it was sometimes like from the Sackville, New Brunswick transmitter site, because it wasn't in terms of shortwave broadcasting that far away from Montreal. I don't know how many times I wanted to listen to Radio Canada International, but I couldn't because I was in the skip zone, so I couldn't hear it. I just have a very weak signal or no signal at all, which made me mad sometimes. But man, Sackville, New Brunswick, that was a transmitter site. So sad that it's gone. So, hey guys, after these souvenirs of the past, I'm going to say goodbye. It was nice to have you here. Once again, if you like what you see and if you enjoy the live shows, you can give in the super chat or on a video. And there's also the PayPal. You can give a little something. And of course, everyone that contributes is going to be invited to the Zoom meeting on January 27th at 20 hours UTC. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It was nice to do the show today. And the next live show is going to be on Saturday, February 3rd at 20 hours Universal Time. So thanks for being here. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Always fun to have you here and have everyone. We got a good turnout today. So take care, everyone. And see you next month on February 3rd, or see you in the Zoom meeting for those that have contributed to the channel. Take care, everyone.